Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Filling in today for Joan, Chicago media personality, John St. Augustine.
Hey, glad to be back with you again. Joan should be back in this chair on Wednesday. She's a little bit under the weather. I'm sure she's on the mend, but we'll give her a couple extra days to get back into fine form. Glad to have you joining me from anywhere and everywhere around the greater and lesser Chicagoland area. If you're online, we're glad to have you as well. So I have a full day set up here, but I wouldn't be able to do this work without two things. Number one is I basically work for hot dogs at this point in my career. So Matt Cummings and I worked back at Oprah Radio 20 years ago, and we're both hot dog aficionados. Matter of fact, Matt I think he worked at Wrigley Field for a while, and he gave me some insight many, many years ago. This is something you should probably write down if you're a Cubs fan and a Bud man. Never buy a hot dog from a vendor before the third inning, because apparently, at least back when Matt was there, those were the hot dogs that were left from the game the night before. So if you're going to get Lady B, you all right? Okay. Her head snapped. What? So those were the hot dogs left from the game the night before. So if you wanted a hot dog before the third inning, you go down to the stand, right? You go down underneath and get your hot dogs and load them up. But other than that, don't eat before the third inning. So basically, I got the call last night to come in and fill in for Joan. Happy to do it. And I knew there'd be some super dog at some point in my future. So, Matt, thanks for the super dog. I'm basically powered by French fries, a green tomato, and mustard for the next 3 hours. And boy, what a 3 hours we have stacked up. I have some people coming on that I am so proud that you'll get a chance to spend time with. At 2:30, Donald Remy is going to be joining me. We're going to be talking about his book called Collegiate Capitalism. He is the former 9th United States Deputy Secretary of the Veterans Affairs under the Biden administration and former Chief Operating Officer and Legal Chief Officer. This is a heavy dude. National Collegiate Athletic Association, you know it as the NCAA, for 10 years from 2011 to 2021. He's going to talk about his book, as I mentioned, Collegiate Capitalism, the battle for the future of college sports, and how college athletics these days is now more about making money than earning scholarships, and that's the way that rolls out. Coming up 3 o'clock, whenever I sit in for Joan, there's always some environmental stuff with me. It is one of my main focus between the veterans issues and anything I can do with environmental awareness, I'm going to do it. So at 3 o'clock, Tim Mayle from the Alliance for Environmental Markets and Investments we'll be on talking about how AEMI brings together leaders from business, government, and academia to accelerate the development of effective environmental markets and investments. And so here's my point with that. Yeah, it'd be great if the government was doing more for the environment, but they're not going to, so we need to wake up out of that illusion and delusion and do it ourselves. And so when a guy like Tim comes along and this great business model they have is about these investments and markets, they're there anyway. Whether we're participating or we're not, that's up to us, even individually or as a society. But there's options out there that I think a lot of people get too stuck on the fact that the EPA isn't doing X, Y, and Z. And while that may be true, it's also there are people doing some amazing things when it comes to environmental work, and we'll talk with Tim about that. 3:30, this is a gas for me. I'm here to tell you. In another lifetime, some of the ways that I earned money legally was that I'm just kidding, Lady B. I'm just kidding. So I used to really be having a sports memorabilia business, and I met a guy named Dino Miliotis back in 92, 93, somewhere in there. And this is one of those unforgettable characters in my life. This guy was intense. He's over the top, also very astute and very interesting. He was a very good salesperson. And he went on to fame and fortune in that business and other businesses and made a you-know-what ton of cash. And then it all came down because of drugs and alcohol. And he spent the last 6-7 years of his life getting clean and sober and moving forward and helping to develop technologies for other people who have difficulty with alcohol and drugs and what have you. And has a technology, as I mentioned, developed to help those people stay clean and sober. It's not just going to meetings, which can work up to a certain point, not just having a sponsor, which helps to a certain point. There's actual technology that you can wear on your wrist that can help you keep going in the right direction. And then at 4 o'clock, today is the first day of school for CPS, and it just turned out that's the way it rolled on this calendar day. And I always check in with Schurz High School, my alma mater, not far from the studio where I'm at now, right down on Milwaukee Avenue. Dr. Heidy Moran is the principal at Schurz. She's going to be joining me and talking about what are the challenges they face again this year, especially when it comes to this budget stuff. And Every time this rolls around, every 2 to 3 years, somewhere in there, you start to see real quick how everything is connected to something else. So they're hoping money comes from the state to do things they want to do. She's already had, as like a lot of schools have, cut serious positions, which then affects the kids. It's all a ripple effect kind of game. So we'll be talking with her at 4 o'clock. And then for my veterans out there, of which I am a proud member of the United States Coast Guard, I have a story for you that is, I'm telling you, this is like one of the great adventures of my lifetime. Way back in the day when I was stationed at Naval Air Station Glenview, which some of you have also served at, I was there from 80 to 84, and one of the helicopters that we flew in and that I got a chance to fly in was the 145, known as the Sikorsky HH-52A helicopter. And after it was retired in like 1998, it went to the Museum of Science and Industry for almost 20 years, I think. And then a small upstart museum in Glenview wanted to have it as their main feature. And so unfortunately, and fortunately, as it turned out, but unfortunately, that museum never really came around. But the helicopter ended up sitting out in a parking lot for 2 decades and not in the best shape. So I'm going to get in that whole story because we were able to rescue the 145 now. And I'm going to be talking with Paul Branke, who's from the Glenview Historical Center, about this incredible journey we've had over the last 7 years to get the 5.9 rescued and headed north to Traverse City, Michigan, to Legacy Aviation for restoration. So it is a full afternoon. But before I get into all that, I have to tell you that I'm just a couple of days away from my 29th year in broadcasting. August 27th, 1997, I flipped the switch on at a little AM radio station in Upper Michigan, little WDBC radio, and I didn't know what I was doing for the next week. Excuse me, I had 5 shows to get it right. I had an hour a week for 5 weeks. I was on at 9 o'clock in the morning. Now, I'm living in a motel at this point. I have really nothing going for me. The people that knew me thought I'd lost every nut that I had because I'm a veteran. I got a college degree. I was doing the right things, and somehow I ended up in this situation with my family at the time, and it was very, very difficult. But I had this epiphany on this really long walk I took from Upper Michigan to Chicago and back in 1996. So 30 years ago, I was getting ready to do that. And on that walk, I had this epiphany. Apparently I'm supposed to go on the radio, and I don't really care about radio, nor should I, but that's how it turned out. And I'll never forget those first 5 shows. Horrible. I mean, I didn't know what. Just stop talking when the sweep second hand gets to the top of the hour so you don't cut the news off. That's all they told me. So I got through the first 4 shows, and I knew I better pull in a ringers or I'm done. 5 shows, they don't work, you're out. Not getting paid, no producer, nothing. Just talk. It's like diving in the deep end, man. And I called Stedman Graham, who at the time and still is Oprah's significant other. We played golf together quite a few times, and I supported his Athletes Against Drugs organization. And I remember calling him and saying, hey, I'm on the air in Michigan. Would you come and talk with me about what you're doing with the organization? He's like, you're where? Doing what? Because he knows me. It's not something I would do. He said he would do it. What I didn't know is on Monday, he was on the cover of People magazine with Oprah. On Tuesday, he had a brand new book coming out. And on Wednesday at 9 o'clock in the morning, he was with me. Like I planned the whole thing, and I didn't. I got 5 more shows and 5 more shows. And at the end of that year, the ownership came and said, hey, we'll give you a contract now. And I thought, this is bigger than me, and it just took off. But I will tell you, I was telling Lady B this before we started, the one thing I learned really quickly, and I don't know if it still holds up, but it probably does, is that as soon as you flip on this microphone, half the people hate you. They don't know you. None of that matters. Whatever it is, it doesn't take much to tick off people, and they don't like you, but they still listen, which is fascinating. It's a weird kind of human dynamic. And I remember when I first made it kind of big into 80 markets west of Michigan, and it was a whole setup how it happened, I replaced Dr. Laura on all these stations. It wasn't my call. It was the radio stations that did it. So I'm, as you can imagine, ecstatic. Oh, my gosh, this is actually working, and let's do this. I was on from 3 to 6, Monday through Fridays, a long haul. And all of a sudden, I started getting all this hate mail and threats. And people, I'm like, what? And this is physical letters. This isn't text messages or email. These are, somebody actually sat down and wrote this to me, and they sent it to the radio station. After about 20 of them, I got so depressed, I thought maybe I should quit. And then there was one in the middle that said, I like what you're saying. That was the one that kind of was a pivot for me. So if you think this is easy to come in and talk about all this stuff over and over again, day after day, like Joan does and the rest of the folks, Tom Hartman, you're taking your hits constantly. And there's not many jobs people have, professions, where you walk in every day and you know half the people hate your guts and you do it anyway. So that's kind of where I'm at with all this. So thanks for listening all these years. Great afternoon set up for you. Some great conversations, and we'll do it together. But first, we're going to go to Little Earth Matters with Bill Curtis. Oh, actually, this one's me, I think. Go ahead.
65 million years ago, an asteroid wiped out the seemingly invincible dinosaurs. Science has concluded we are in the midst of the sixth extinction on Earth. There have been 5 mass extinctions on the planet, according to the scientific data, with causes ranging from the aforementioned asteroid to the greatest loss of species on Earth 250 million years ago from a prolonged volcanic event that released a huge amount of carbon dioxide into the air. So what does all that have to do with life in the 21st century? Everything. Humans are eradicating species at 1,000 times the natural rate due to a myriad of actions that we take, like clear-cutting, acid rain, CO2 emissions, overfishing, overhunting, and loss of habitat. Are humans on the list of endangered species? We certainly didn't weave the web of life, but we forget we're merely a strand in it. For Earth Matters, I'm John St. Augustine.
Alexa, play WCPT.
WCPT from TuneIn.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Filling in today for Joan, Chicago media personality, John St. Augustine.
Glad to be with you till 5 o'clock. Then Patty will be in after that. Well, Patty's kind of in. There's a lot of moving parts around here, so we'll get to all that in a little bit. But glad to be with you. And as I mentioned, in about 15 minutes, Donald Remy will be joining me. We'll be talking about his book, Collegiate Capitalism. But before that, a couple things popped up. Driving in today, I had to come up 294 North to come around to go into the city. A lot of traffic because there's a lot of construction up there, and it's good. It's needed because there's just no way around it. It needs to be expanded. So we're talking about around North Avenue there, Lake Street. And I thought about the time when I used to pay my bills working construction in this area of the city, all over the Chicagoland area. Proud member of Merit Concrete. I think half the driveways in Norridge, I probably poured those. And I started thinking about first jobs and things like that. And I think I may have made $10 an hour, $8 an hour, something like that. This would have been in the late. Lady B's eyebrows went straight up. Maybe $8 an hour. And this was hard labor work. This is breaking out concrete and breaking out porches and pouring concrete and running. And so my thing was to drive the dump truck because it was close to my home. And I learned how to drive it. And then I learned how to drive what's called a Bobcat, which is like a little front end loader. And for, I don't know, a couple, 3 summers, whether when in high school and my first year or 2 of college, I worked for the Merit Concrete. And I got to tell you, the work ethic I learned from that first real paying heavy duty job. I had a couple little things before that. That's my first real, like, you need to show up on time. You need to get this done. If you don't get paid kind of deal. And I was talking to some friends of mine the other day who they were mentioning their kids who were in their early mid to 20s, something like that. And one of them, I think the daughter she wanted to know why there wasn't a high school course in how to be an influencer. And I can't answer that question. And I thought to myself, when I was 20, my influencers, like my mother, my grandmother, people like that, my dad, cousins, all that stuff, and they weren't paid to do anything except be themselves around me. And I took that very serious. So I was thinking about work ethic and how that plays out in our world today. And just wondering, we have a few minutes, if your first job, what you learned from that, and has that carried over into the life that you have now? I mean, I don't break concrete anymore for a living, but every time I drive up the street and I see one of those giant cement trucks, I thought that would be the perfect pinnacle for me. And by the way, a shout out to anyone working construction when it's hot out. I know what you're going through, especially the truck drivers. Give them leeway and width and breadth to do their job. We all have room. We'll all get there. Just take your time doing that. But I was just wondering if you had a first job that was really made an impact on you, and whether you stayed in that or not. Is that something that you still carry on today? I mean, I get up really early in the morning to work on projects, and it goes all the way back to making sure I was in the garage at Merit Concrete pulling nails at 6:30 or 7 in the morning. It's just funny how that stuff stays with you. So you can give us a call if you want, and let me know what you're doing with that. In short order, we'll be getting to Donald Remy in about 10 minutes. And I think the other job that I had, and job being kind of a loose definition would have been my time in the military. I mean, it's certainly a job. It's a career as well. But the military bearing and the things you have to do in the military, at least it was for me back in the 80s, and even boot camp I thought it was great, quite frankly. You know, I've been getting yelled at since I was a little kid, so that was no big deal. And I like the physical part of it. But learning all the things that I had to learn in order to perform on a team, not just sports related, but when it comes to the military, search and rescue, things like that with the Coast Guard, that's stuff that has just been so profound for me over the years that it's not always just about me, it's about we. And the more we understand that, the less my concerns and our concerns become into the bigger picture of things. And you can find your place and work together. Learning how to work together, of course, is a whole nother thing. But those were the things that I was thinking about on the way in here, about how those early jobs that we have, at least mine, have really stayed with me. And to this day, I'm like one of those Geico commercials or Progressive commercials or whatever it is. You know, if I see somebody digging a hole in the street, I want to go over and look and see what they're doing. When I was working this stuff back in the 70s and 80s, all these old guys used to come around and pull a chair up and watch us pour driveways. Now I know why. There's a fascination with something being knocked down and putting back together. Anyway, that's what was on my mind. But before I get to Donald, I want to just talk about something that was announced here real quick. Because I said to Lady B, I said, he really didn't say that, did he? Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent held a press conference to announce new sanctions against Iran in a sustained financial operation that the Trump administration is calling Operation Economic Outcast. And Bessent said it's on par with D-Day. So a couple of years ago, I was at the beach in Omaha Beach and all the rest of it out there. It's a very sacred and challenging place to be, especially if you're a veteran. And now, of course, they have a lot of museums and things like that. But to go to the beaches there and to see what happened there and to equate that to economic sanctions, I don't think I can get on board with that. And so when I think about how we militarize things and weaponize things to equate them to something else, even as much football as I've played over the years, and as much as I have been in the military and support all that, it wasn't until about 25 years ago that they started integrating military stuff into the sports things, which kind of overlaps each other. At one point, one of the biggest sponsors for football, NFL football, was the United States Army. They use it as a recruiting tool. So all this stuff gets kind of mismatched together. It's kind of hard to pull it apart sometimes. And I think to myself, you know, that's really what's ahead of us at this point. You know, the way the world is today, and it is far different than it was when I was just a 20-year-old kid, that's for sure. We have more technology at our fingertips, but we're further apart. And we've not learned how to communicate with each other. And even difficulties and challenges and differences can be bridged, but you have to be able to have conversation. And I don't know if those days will ever come back. Even doing radio, this is one way for me. I mean, I see people checking in with some questions and things. I probably won't get to that today, but I appreciate that you're at least listening. And maybe you'll take some of what I have to say to heart and you can do something with it. As I mentioned before about this environmental stuff, you'll hear the Earth Matters spots during my show today till 5 o'clock. And I wrote some of those 10, 15 years ago. And I thought, my God, I shouldn't have to play this stuff anymore, but it's the truth. And so when we look at these pieces that hinge our very lives hinge on, which to me is like the life support system of the planet, because there's nowhere else to go. Anytime you start messing with that stuff, that to me is like the DNA of denial. And I think of my mom, quite frankly, when it comes to this. She smoked for years and thought she'd never get cancer. She drank for years and never thought she would get cirrhosis of the liver. And then one day it all catches up with you and then you go, oh, what happened? How did this happen? And I see that denial gene the same way that most people see the environment. The earth is too big. We can't possibly, not true. And I'm not even talking about climate change. Now I'm talking about in the areas where you live, look at the data center things with water. I mean, this is going to get to be a real problem. I don't know if I lined up one of the Earth Matters when it came to the concept of tapped out. Many, many years ago, the late great senator from Illinois, Paul Simon, the man with the bow tie, not Simon and Garfunkel Simon, but he wrote a book called Tapped Out. When I was just enamored with it, he predicted at that time, this is 1998, 99, when he wrote that book, that in the next 20 to 50 years, we'd be so squeezed for clean water resources that wars will break out like they do over oil, like they do for land. And he passed away, and I kept monitoring a lot of his predictions, and they were already happening. It didn't take 20 years. It took 10. Because there's a system to this planet. We don't run the system. We're just part of the system. So I think what happens is we start to think we're above all this stuff, but we're not. We're not a part of it. We're not apart from it. We're a part of it. And when you understand that you're part of that, just like it was being on any team, you got to figure out what role you play. I take great care in my backyard, not so much the front yard because that kind of takes care of itself. But my backyard, we try to grow some vegetables. We put up stuff that's, for the animals and the bees and the things like that and shade and the birds and the whole deal. And I look at that little plot of land that we have as like a sanctuary. That's why I do it. And so whatever comes out of all that, I'm good with it. And imagine if we all took that mentality where we live now and thought about that along the same lines, that we are inextricably, whether you like it or not, connected to the life force of this planet. It's 4.67 billion years old. And me at my wise age of 68, I don't know shirt when it comes to all this stuff, but you have to understand that you fit in somewhere. And listen, a lot of species have come and gone, and we're going to have our time, and we may be the only species that actually does ourselves in over time, slowly for sure, but definitely making that pace. And I think about the concept of doing something about those things that are important. And if I didn't get on when I had this microphone and say these things, then I shouldn't be on here at all. All those Earth Matters that we did in syndication, some are still airing in Trinidad for some reason, but these are reminders that, this life support that we have is not guaranteed, and that we have to take care of the things that take care of us. And if we don't do that, you're kind of up Shirt Creek, and that's the way that works. So you're going to hear the rest of this between now and 5 o'clock. We have some more of those Earth Matters lined up. We're going to get ready here in a few seconds to talk with Donald Remy, and stay tuned for more right after this on WCPT.
For most of us, a simple flip of the faucet is sufficient, but deep underground, it's a very different story. If you have ever had the water in your home shut off for any reason, repairs, what have you, you realize pretty quickly how much we take what comes out of that sink for granted. Now imagine living in an area where you rely on a well for all your water needs, from bathing to drinking. And that well has gone dry. Much of the world relies on groundwater for survival, and in many places around the globe, including right here in the United States, so much groundwater has been pumped out that the aquifers that keep them supplied simply cannot be replenished. In a day and age where bottled water costs as much as a gallon of gas, it's not hard to figure out that as climate change increases and the groundwater decreases, that water is fast becoming more precious than oil in many parts of the world. So don't be surprised if one day H2O is a symbol on the stock exchange. I'm John St. Augustine for Earth Matters.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Filling in today for Joan, Chicago media personality, John St. Augustine.
All right, I'm really looking forward to this conversation. In full disclosure, I spend most mornings with my next guest. I should say my first guest, unless I count myself guesting already, which probably isn't good. But I thought I'm just going to read a portion of his. I know you're shaking your head, Lady B, I'm sorry. But I was going to read the short version of Donald Remy's bio, but the longer version, which is just 2 paragraphs, is much more interesting. The Honorable Donald M. Remy, founder and CEO of the Remy Group, is a distinguished leader with extensive experience in government, corporate, and legal sectors. As the 9th Deputy Secretary of the United States Department of Veterans Affairs, he managed a $325 billion budget, 450,000 employees, and the largest integrated healthcare benefits and cemetery system in the United States, earning Meritorious Service Award for his transformative leadership. Previously, as Chief Operating Officer and Legal Chief Officer at the NCAA, he oversaw strategic planning, media rights, operations, and legal affairs for the $1 billion organization, advocating for athlete experience and driving operational improvements. He has handled crisis management, compliance, you name it, he's done it. He had senior roles at Fannie Mae, where he supported multifamily community redevelopment after Hurricane Katrina. A Hall of Distinction alum of Louisiana State University and cum laude graduate of Howard University School of Law. He has also served as the Deputy Assistant Attorney General and Assistant to the General Counsel for the United States Army. A decorated U.S. Army officer and U.S. President Lifetime Achievement Award recipient, he has driven cultural change and long-term strategic growth across diverse organizations, and his board affiliations are as long as my arm. I want to introduce my good friend Donald Remy to the show.
Well, thank you, John, for that long introduction. Way too long.
Did you write that
conversation?
Did you write that?
I have no idea where that came from, and I don't remember half of those things. But it's good. It's good to be with you here this afternoon.
Yeah, same here. So, in full disclosure, we're working on this book called Collegiate Capitalism. It's been out for a little while. It's a hefty read, just about 400 pages or so. And maybe 6, 8, 10 weeks ago, we started working on the audio version of your book. And I tell people all the time, working with you is really interesting because this is the first time in my life an attorney's ever told me I was right about anything. So that was good. But then there's also this other piece that for so many people like me that are just sports fans, football, basketball, March Madness, volleyball, you name it, women's basketball, all of that runs kind of through the NCAA, lane there. Reading the book and going through the book with you is really depressing. At least the first half of it was, because you're working from the inside out. And Donald, most of this stuff that you have dealt with, no one's either ever heard of or ever paid attention to. So one of the first things that really grabbed me when we were doing the work on the book was something to do with when you bought your kids a video game for Christmas and how that was like a pivot point for a lot of this.
Yeah, absolutely. There are a lot of things that happen over the last couple of decades in college athletics that have changed the landscape entirely. But the video game thing just goes to, most of your listeners probably have played some video games at some time in their lives, right? Mm-hmm. And so my kids woke up one Christmas morning to a video game under the tree, and they went to play it, and it was the NCAA March Madness video game. And I was sitting there watching the kids play the game. They're having a ball, not thinking about anything other than the players and the teams in that video game. What they didn't realize, what I didn't realize, is that video game would be the subject of a big lawsuit. A lawsuit brought by a guy named Ed O'Bannon. And the lawsuit claimed, hey, the people that you see in the video game, they're not getting paid for it. Why is that? Why not me?
And that begs this huge question, or I guess it has this piece, a bookmark for lack of a better term. Most of us grew up thinking if you go to college, you're just a college athlete. You should be glad to get a scholarship, and that's the end of it. And of course, that isn't the end of it, because that's just one way of seeing this. And in some way, shape, or form, I guess, with the onslaught of the media and the money and all the rest of it, it was kind of inevitable. At some point, these lines are going to get blurred and crossed. So what happened with the O'Bannon thing? Because I remember reading about it. Obviously, we went through all that. But what was really the outcome of that? It was like a tipping point, wasn't it?
It absolutely was. It was the first time that a court made us defend the economics out loud, under oath, with evidence, and candidly, the argument didn't survive contact with cross-examination, right? We had good answers, but they weren't the answers that we needed to be able to offer in order to support the program. And so at the end of the day, what happened? The court said individuals who appeared in these video games should have been compensated for what we all now know as NIL, their name, images, and likenesses.
So here's the other piece of this. I'm thinking whoever created that, was that, what was the name of the company that created it? Something Arts, wasn't it?
EA Electronic Arts, EA Sports.
That they thought they could just use these likenesses and not pay anybody. What did they think about all this?
Yeah, so they were contractually prohibited from actually using actual players in the video games. That was something that would be a violation of NCAA rules, and they couldn't do it. And so they created these avatars, but the problem was the avatars looked like the players. They played like the players. They had all the same physical characteristics, and the number that the player would wear, they just didn't have the name.
I told you many times during this process that I don't envy your position, especially when you're at the NCAA, because the NCAA really wasn't set up for this in the beginning, right? No one could they foresee all this was coming?
In the beginning, people don't really understand. The NCAA was created back in 1905 as a result of a number of individuals actually dying playing football. And President Roosevelt at the time said, listen, we've got to do something about the health and safety of this game we call football. And so universities leaders got together and they created this organization of self-governance, meaning all the universities would decide on the rules and they would comply with the rules that they put together. But they weren't thinking about the big-time economics that were part of the system. Not back then they weren't.
Yeah. Money's the driving factor in every aspect of society, for sure. And the bigger sports got, I mean, a friend of mine, Jerry Kramer, played in the first 2 Super Bowls, and the tickets were $15. He gave free ones away. And I asked him many times, could you ever think there? He said, I didn't think there'd be a third one. I mean, who cares? It's football. But something built around that whole mystique of the Super Bowl, and it's the world champions and the rings and the whole thing. Once they really hooked into all that, I think everything else followed. And it's never stopped. And I often wonder, is there a saturation point, Donald, where it's like enough's enough, or we haven't even gotten close to that?
I don't think we've gotten close. The money has just proved to be too enticing, too big for anybody to stop chasing it, and for anybody to step back and realize the impact that it's had on the games. And that's true in the professional ranks as well, but certainly in the college space. And so now you're seeing just absolute craziness around how to manage and control the college sports environments, because the courts have gotten involved and they've created rules that the schools really can't put together to create a coherent national system.
Moving on to the next piece that was really difficult, that I recall vividly, of course, was the whole thing with Penn State. And that whole piece in your book, and again, the book is called Collegiate Capitalism. You can get it on Amazon. It's a fantastic read. It's a real educational piece. If you're a sports fan, you need to read this book, because as much as I knew about sports and enjoy sports, I want to understand more about the inner workings so I can kind of gauge where I want to spend my time, quite frankly. And that whole thing about Penn State and how that went down, the Paterno thing and all the rest of it, on one hand was like, I think like the core sampling of how in this country we, at least a section of us, value sports over our moral compass.
Yeah, I mean, for those of your listeners that weren't following what happened in Penn State back in 2012, go back and take a look at it. You certainly can read the book, but just explore that moment in time. It was when a former defensive coordinator at Penn State, Jerry Sandusky, was convicted of child sexual abuse that occurred in the athletics facilities on the campus, right? Mm-hmm. And, you know, that's bad enough, but you had leaders in the organization that didn't do enough to stop this behavior. And so what I talk about is that Penn State taught us that the NCAA's autonomy, its ability to act alone, is conditional. You know, you've got governors and senators and public outrage, and they all converge. And the bylaws that govern college sports, they're not the ruling documents that control this moment. And that's not a legal insight, it's a political one, right? Mm-hmm. And it applies to everything that's happened in college sports since then. And so anyone who thinks that the NCAA can wait out this moment in time with all of the things that are happening in college sports right now, they should study 2012 in the Penn State circumstance.
The guy that was the whistleblower, the coach, I don't recall his name, actually had death threats, correct?
He did. Mike McQuarrie was his name, and he saw something that deeply troubled him, and he reported it up through the channels. And you would think, okay, here's a guy who's reported something, reported an incident where a child was being abused. You know, he should be heralded and he should be celebrated. But because the dominoes that fell after that report were so severe and so significant to Penn State, what you saw was a community that rallied around football, rallied around a football coach, rather than dealt with the circumstances of child sexual abuse.
And the irony, of course, it's Happy Valley, right?
Well, Happy Valley wasn't so happy.
No, Happy Valley wasn't so happy. We're talking with Donald Remy. His book is called Collegiate Capitalism. And it's a tough read in the fact that it really pulls the curtains back on how I grew up thinking about sports. Listen, we're going to take a break here in a couple minutes, and we come back. I want to talk about this whole NIL thing. But before we get to that, the thing that jumped into my mind as soon as I got the call to come on and have you come on and talk about this was when I played college football, I was just so glad to have a scholarship. And then they'd say, we'll get you a part-time job. I thought I was a millionaire. I wouldn't make it these days, right? And I think about how just in the space of my lifetime, and that was in the 70s and the 80s, it's changed so rapidly. And I don't even know if we can even keep up with all this stuff. But we're talking with Donald Remy. The book is called Collegiate Capitalism. We'll come back on the other side of this short break. We're going to talk about the NIL thing. We're going to talk about these brain injuries things going on with athletes. And it goes on and on from there. A TikTok video comparing weight rooms shifted an entire sports culture. It's fascinating stuff. Back with more right after this on WCPT.
Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Filling in today for Joan, Chicago media personality, John St. Augustine.
College sports is being remade, and this is how it happened. The book is called Collegiate Capitalism, The Battle for the Future of College Sports. It debuted at #1 on Amazon's Sports Law bestseller list. Donald Remy, former chief legal officer and chief operating officer of the NCAA, pulls back the curtain on the forces reshaping college athletics. He joins me this afternoon. Donald, I played probably almost 20 years of football. You know, I played park ball, then I played high school football, I played college football, I played semi-pro, it's the same thing.
Right.
It's the same thing. You know what I'm talking about. And I can remember 6, 8, 10 times that I didn't know what day it was, who the president was, where I was going, and stuff like that. These concussions were real. The equipment I wore back then, obviously not what they wear these days, but it's still something that is obviously a major, major concern. And part of the book, you talk about addressing these concussion issues, brain injuries. And one of the points I think you made that was really important was the NCAA is not really is in the business of informing people, but not paying them money if and when things like that happen. Can you clarify what the role is there?
Yeah, listen, there were a number of lawsuits, right, that I'll call them the brain injury cases. And they forced us to really recognize issues that we had deferred. What the NCAA was established to do in the very beginning, as I talked about at the top of your show, was to protect the health and safety of then young men playing football. And the way that we did that was based on the science of the day. And so the challenges in the litigation space, in the lawsuit space, with providing damages for an individual that may have suffered a concussion is that there's this whole elaborate space of proof that has to be worked through before you get there. But what the NCAA does is focus on creating a system whereby athletes can compete in a safe environment, to create a space for them to learn whether or not they've been impacted by these circumstances, whether it's repetitive head injuries over and over again, or whether it's a single concussion. Yeah, but what we recognize is we were asking young people to absorb thousands of head impacts inside this multi-billion-dollar entertainment product, and at the same time saying, listen, this is about education. And so we had to focus on health and safety.
So I mentioned Jerry Kramer a little bit ago. He's now 90 years old. He played Super Bowl I, Super Bowl II, 11 years in the NFL. He's in Canton. And some days I talk to him, he's clearer than I am at 90. And he talked about concussions and things like that. And I wonder, how does a guy like that who absorbed all that punishment for those years, and it's been many, many years ago, doesn't seem to show any signs of anything to do with concussion. Other people play 2 or 3 years. And my thought was, is there some sort of, something in our DNA maybe that makes some people more susceptible than others?
Yeah, so the NCAA has engaged in what is the largest longitudinal, that means over time, study of concussion that has ever been done, working with the Department of Defense to understand these circumstances of how repetitive head trauma may impact one person one way and another person another way. Are there blood biomarkers that you can look at to determine whether somebody is genetically predisposed to have a more severe consequence as a result of this concussion? And this type of research is well underway so that we can understand not just concussion, but any type of continued head trauma, and certainly CTE, which we've talked about a lot nowadays in society when we're talking about football players.
One of the things you talk about in your book, Collegiate Capitalism, is when you saw the movie with Will Smith.
Yeah, well, Will Smith played Dr. Bennett Amalu, who is the scientist, the medical official who discovered CTE. And if you've ever seen the movie, it's a very compelling story around what concussion can do to football players. Now, it focuses mostly on the NFL, but the idea behind the story is that these athletes were suffering this potential brain trauma, while at the same time the league was enjoying all of the economic rewards of their competition.
Right. We go back to 1905 when Teddy Roosevelt said we need to fix this because young people are dying. I think it was 18 in one season or something like that. And
yes.
Here we are now all these decades later, and you're out of the NCAA, so you can kind of say whatever you want. You wrote the book on it, so you definitely can say whatever you want. Do you think enough's being done these days with equipment, with the way practices are run, the way the games are being set up to protect these guys?
I think it is. I mean, I think we are at a stage where we recognize what the health and safety challenges are, where we know what technological advancements have occurred, and where we're able to provide the tools to make the sport as safe as possible. Understand, it's football.
Right.
It's never going to be 100% safe. You're not going to be able to avoid every single injury that might arise. But I think the focus on the health and safety of the athletes at the collegiate levels and at the professional level is probably higher than it's ever been.
Let's fast forward to March Madness, which is exactly what it says, March Madness. It is an amazing event for basketball lovers and players and the fans that go around all that stuff. It is a huge deal. But one of the big lessons in the book is what the global pandemic taught the NCAA about March Madness. What was that?
Well, we knew that the revenue for the NCAA occurs in a single month of the year with a single event, and that is March Madness. It'd take too long to talk about football, but just for the purposes of your question, understand that the college football playoff system revenue that's generated doesn't flow through the NCAA. So when you had COVID arise and we had to make a decision about whether or not we could continue, the financial challenges associated with our model became very, very clear. One canceled tournament revealed that the financial model of an entire association rested on those 3 weeks in March. And that's not a business model, that's exposure. So a lot of people looked at decisions that were made during that period of time, and they criticized those decisions. But what we determined was because of the public health challenges that existed, we simply couldn't put on the tournament. We learned a lot later on and were able to do it in a controlled environment, but that year we could not.
For years, women's sports has lagged way behind. We go back to Title IX and all that type of stuff. And, I can remember when I was in high school, forget that, in grammar school, there were two girls that were better than the boys playing softball. We always picked them, but they never played sports in their school. This wasn't done. So Title IX opened these floodgates, and rightfully so, for fantastic athletes, female athletes to come and play and do things. And we see where it's gone in just, again, a few decades. It's amazing that it's come as far as it has. But I don't think it's still anywhere near, obviously, what the men's teams get out of it. And there was this little thing in the book about an athlete posting a TikTok video comparing weight rooms. Do you remember this?
Oh, yeah, I remember it quite vividly. And, when you think about Title IX was supposed to have settled the issue of gender equity way back in the 70s.
Right.
And this video showed that we'd been managing the appearance of equity rather than delivering it, right? Mm-hmm. And what this was Sedona Prince had posted a video of the weight room for the women's tournament and then panned out and showed this cavernous space, and then compared that to the weight room for the men's tournament that was occurring in a different location. And the question was, how could you have such disparate or different weight room facilities for the men and for the women? And it created a lot of conversation. We conducted a review around gender equity and around, have we reached a point where we're actually delivering on the promises of Title IX, and realized that we hadn't.
Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark have put women's basketball on the map, correct?
I agree 100%.
Yeah. So I don't know what they earn per year, but I'm sure it's not the money that the guys are earning. Do you ever see a time where they're going to be equaled out or no?
Well, you should know the WNBA Players Association just negotiated the new collective bargaining agreement this year, which increases the salaries for WNBA players at a level greater than the year-over-year increase in any sport at any time in history. So we are getting closer to pay equity in that space.
And that's only made possible because of TV revenues, I would guess. And the like.
Well, TV revenues, their NIL deals in the women's college basketball space as well, allowing for endorsement contracts. But yes, this is part of the revenue sharing from the revenue generated by the WNBA through their TV revenues.
I'm glad you brought up the NIL thing because until 5 years ago, nobody knew what the hell that meant, right? Because nobody said it. Now NIL is everywhere. I'm watching this Netflix series about the SEC football teams, and it is equally depressing and impressive at the same time. The production values, of course, are fantastic. As a production guy, I really appreciate that. But the stories they tell of these young men and the coaches, quite frankly, they're all interchangeable. You know, they all say the same thing at the same time in the same way, and they're all hoping for the same result, which is to be the top dog in the whole deal. And come to find out that I think 4 out of the 5 coaches in that series have already been fired or moved on. They just get hired somewhere else for more money. But at one of these... one of the episodes, there was one of the players was out signing autographs, and literally an 8-year-old kid came up and said, "I got an NIL deal myself going." He's 8. So can you explain a little bit of what's happening with this NIL wave of enthusiasm?
Well, you know, it's a wave for sure. I'm surprised to learn that it goes down to the 8-year-old, but you know, that is the world that we're living in. You know, basically, it's been the case for a long, long time that athletes can receive endorsement deals. You saw this in the professional leagues.
Sure.
You know, think about Michael Jordan with Nike. You know, but the NIL opportunities that opened up after the O'Bannon case, after the states passed legislation allowing it to happen in a number of different jurisdictions, and the NCAA changed its rules, has now become the currency that people look for when deciding where to go play football or basketball or many other sports at various educational institutions.
So I know you're out of the NCAA portal, but I still had to ask you this question. I'm sure you've seen this thing where multiple NFL players will put their names in the college football transfer portal to go back. The court ruling that granted a 5th year of eligibility to some former college athletes opened Pandora's box. They can go back and get eligibility. So leaving the NFL where they wanted to go and play, go back to college, make money for a 5th year eligibility. I don't know if they're going to try and come back in the NFL, but some of these guys are on 4, 5, 6 year programs and they're making millions of dollars and may never play a down of pro football. So the line basically between amateur and pro on some levels is basically gone, isn't it?
Well, that's what it looks like. The one line college sports never crossed was the line between professional and collegiate. And you're right, that line is gone. This is a case out of Louisiana, and that order specifically bars the NCAA from blocking athletes who signed professional contracts and hired agents or even competed in professional events from coming back to college. So we're in a new paradigm right now where this enterprise operates as a commercial business, and trying to enforce those amateur era eligibility rules is getting harder and harder and harder.
Last question, and maybe it's more just of an observation. You know, I've told you this many times in private. This really sucks to be a fan at this point because I'm rooting for these people. That, you know, the whole thing was to go through college and get picked by a team and go have a great career, even though it's the shortest thing you could ever do, 3 to 5 years in the NFL. And then you kind of make your way up the ladder. Those days are gone. So do you see any redeeming quality value in the way things are now? Is it over for sports fans, people like me, or should we have some heart somewhere?
Well, listen, what we've been talking about really only touches the tip of college athletics, not really Division II or Division III or even the lower levels of Division I. All of that, the majesty of college athletics in the higher education space with all those schools marches on, and the band continues to play. At this highest level, it's transforming into something else. I still think it will be connected to the university, and I still think that the fight song will matter, and I still think the fans will show up. It's just that the players will be operating a little differently, or a lot differently, and we're going to get used to that in this new paradigm with all of this money and these players sharing in that revenue, which they never had before.
I got to figure out a way to get me an NIL deal, Donald. I don't know where it is, or if an 8-year-old can get it, I'm missing something somewhere. The book is called Collegiate Capitalism: The Battle for the Future of College Sports by Donald Remy. You can get it at Amazon.com or go right to the website collegiatecapitalism.com. Donald, a pleasure being with you today and a pleasure to work with you. We'll talk soon.
Thank you for having me on. Have a great day.
Good stuff. I'm telling you right now, if you're a sports fan, you need to read this book, Collegiate Capitalism: The Battle for the Future of College Sports. We'll take a short time out, take care of the people that take care of us. Back with more after this on WCPT.
Remember when you get to work to hop over to WCPT820.com or the TuneIn Radio app and stream The Stephanie Miller Show. Weekdays 8 to 11 a.m. on Chicago's Progressive Talk, where facts matter. Because facts matter. You are listening to WCPT 820.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Filling in today for Joan, Chicago media personality, John St. Augustine.
Of all the things I've had as a career in my life, I never thought media personality would be one of them. So, but I appreciate the little title there very much. As I said when I opened the show, and you've heard these Earth Matters pieces on here for years, and as they still are in syndication in some places. I started that project with Bill Curtis back in 2014, I think it was. And the idea is to take a lot of information that people usually don't hear or don't have access to, or choose not to have access to, depending on how you look at it, and then condense those down into 1 minute digestible bite-sized brain bites that we could get little glimpses of things about the environment, about what's going on in the world, those type of things, and all the science around it and all the rest of it that you don't have time for during long-form pieces of work. So we started doing these, and I would write an Earth Matters if something caught my eye through science journals or what have you, and it would take about 2 hours to write a minute. That's how much research went in. So you're doing about 350 of these. You're talking about some serious time in research and investing in finding sources that are reliable and then transforming this sometimes big speak in science into digestible stuff for people to understand. And then, of course, you take Bill Curtis's voice and everything goes together like it's supposed to. And when the response we got from putting those on the air was just remarkable. We both did it, both basically out of our stewardship of the planet, the things that we see we were able to do. Bill, of course, in television for years with Cold Case Files and everything he did on A&E, and then everything I've done in radio. And so we put all that together. They were very effective, and you've heard some of those today. You'll hear a couple more this afternoon. And when I started thinking about what collaboration's like and what it's like to have pieces put together so other organizations can find out more about what you're doing and then kind of tag team to get better results, I then jumped ahead to an Earth Matters event that Jennifer Weigel and I did at the Climate Change Museum here in Chicago, which a lot of people don't even know exists. And I think it's a Climate Action Museum, not the Climate Change Museum. And so we did an evening there, and it was packed, and it was so interesting to sit there in front of a room full of real human beings when most of the time I spend a lot of my hours in production, which is by myself, and then taking voices and putting it all together and creating this stuff. And to sit there and have these Earth Matters playing, which we put to video, they became little mini movies. And to hear the response from people from stuff we wrote years ago told me two things. One is repetition is everything. It's like that's why radio commercials run endlessly over and over and over and over again, because they're trying to get you to do something. So the more we talk about this stuff, the more people are apt to take action. And the second part of this that came out of it, I learned about something called the Alliance for Environmental Markets and Investments. And we had quite a conversation that night, Carlene and I and Jennifer, and we were talking till late in the night about what AEMI really does, which was being established as a connector to support the unprecedented level of activity, ecological and environmental restoration, and efforts to mitigate climate change impacts. Through its flagship initiative, the Environmental Markets Conference, AEMI advances collaboration, education, investment, and market-based environmental solutions. I said it when I opened the show. If you're waiting for the EPA or anybody in Washington to do a thing, you're going to be waiting a long you-know-what time. I didn't say the words. They can't kick me off the air. But you know what? It starts with a you-know-what. It ends with a you-know-what. So you got to turn your focus to things and people that are actually doing things, I think, and support those initiatives, because in the private sector, way more than in the public sector, this stuff's being addressed. Tim Mayle is joining me from the Alliance for Environmental Markets and Investments. We're going to talk about how AEMI brings leaders from business and government and academia to accelerate the development of effective environmental markets and investments. And he joins me now. Tim, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. Great to be here.
So am I accurate in my assessment so far?
You are. Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming.
It's really impressive. Yeah.
Well, you guys wrote it. I just read it. It's all good. But listen, tell me about the how this all kind of got started with AEMI. You guys, incredible board of directors. You got incredible vision. What was the impetus for this to actually get started?
So people have been getting together to talk about markets to invest in nature and water for about 30 years. In fact, this is the 30th year conference coming up next year in Dallas, Texas. At the end of the day, everybody knows that water is crucial, that nature is special to people, and that a lot of it has been damaged, including damaged in ways that hurt our economy or hurt a local community when there's flooding. So the core premise behind this market is that there's a whole bunch of companies across America, big to small, that are really, really good at finding places that nature can be repaired, that water resources can be repaired. They're really good at fixing it. And trying to bring together those people along with government, customers, other regulators, researchers, to be able to talk together about what works and what we can deliver and how we can do it better.
I made mention of the fact that, I'm old enough to remember, and I think you are too, when the EPA started. It wasn't because Richard Nixon was a great environmentalist. It started because the Cuyahoga River in Ohio was on fire and people had had enough, and something had to be done. And then Earth Day came around, and I think they just capitalized on it, and they started the EPA. So in a backwards way, they really did put something important in place. But it's also a government agency, and you've had far more experience working in that area than I have. So what are the pros and cons of, kind of the what we're expecting the government to do for us environmentally, and with organizations like you have can do?
Yeah, at its core, think about the stock market in general. Government does play a really valuable role in setting standards, defining what quality looks like. They're less good at actually delivering the solution. And so, what exists in environmental markets, the reason that America now has a $4 billion a year private investment in nature restoration and water restoration, is because government has worked together with scientists and the private sector to set standards on what high quality wetland restoration, stream restoration, and wildlife habitat restoration looks like. And so if you can deliver nature to that standard, there's a lot of situations in which you can find a buyer for that enhanced habitat. That's a good example of where government has stepped in, helped build the consistency, and then step back and let private sector innovate.
So you've also worked, obviously, in office at local levels where you're at. You served 3 terms in city government. And so how did that help you, if at all, doing what you do now?
Yeah, being in city government, you're right there helping people with potholes and stop signs and street crossings. But at local government, you see the effects of the benefits of environment for local communities, whether it's trees capturing rainwater or trying to make sure the buildings are not in harm's way from flooding. So the companies that are part of, and some of the members that are part of the Alliance for Environmental Markets and Investment, deliver solutions, environmental restoration solutions for local government, state government, federal government, and private companies. So as a local government in Maryland, a city of 18,000 people, we hired contractors to fix streams to help store floodwater and keep pollutants like water runoff from streets out of Chesapeake Bay in the area where I live. That was something that private contractors did really well.
So over the years, I think environmental awareness has kind of come and gone. During times of difficulty in our country, we see what happens when we don't take care of the resources and like that, when the rivers are running dry, or the aquifers are having difficulty, and when they're shipping water in for golf courses and all these kind of things. Most people listening to this show and watch the news, they only get that version of what's going on in the world, some of those most difficult things, and that should be obviously observed and looked at and discussed for sure. But you guys have this conference every year that needs to really be focused on? Because what you're doing, I'm not going to say under the radar, because that's not what I mean, but maybe under a lot of media radar, you guys are really doing some serious work here, connecting and people and organizations and that maybe wouldn't have connected had you not had this conference.
Yeah, that's right. You talked about the kind of a lot of the negative stories you hear. Fundamentally, this is a conference of hundreds of people who are really, really good at their jobs, and their jobs are enhancing nature. And the cool thing for me, I've been doing environmental work for 25 years now, is just how common it is all around the world for you to be able to find a set of people who know how to repair some natural place that's damaged, maybe even enhance the services it provides to us. So, those kinds of solutions are real. I mean, people give examples of restored places storing massive amounts of flood water, protecting a community as a fire break to keep fire from spreading. People are really, really good at fixing this if we can do it in the right place, and if there's a reason to do so. I love that. I am so optimistic about the chance to put nature back in a lot of places that benefit both it and communities around the country.
I wonder how many.
I can just give you one example of something. Birds. Decline of birds has been a pretty negative story. Somebody did a paper a few years ago about America losing 3 billion birds. But if you looked at the group of birds, the only group of birds that were doing better were wetland birds, and that's partly because, as you said, 1970s. Clean Water Act, EPA founded, and this concerted effort to help wetlands. You've now got more water birds in America than we had, 30, 40 years ago. And that kind of success is the kind of thing we can actually deliver, at scale all around the country now for lots of different kinds of places.
Talking with Tim Mayle from the Alliance for Environmental Markets and Investments. We come back to this. I want to talk about this investment piece of this, environmental products, actually, and I want to see what that covers. And, I don't know if this exactly falls in line, but I think every time I drive by and see a house with a set of solar panels up, they're doing the right thing. There's a business model there. And as much as the current administration tries to push that stuff off to the side, there are ways to get this done. And I think every time you make one little step like that, one person sees it, next thing you know, somebody else buys it. You don't need anybody's permission in the nation's capital to do the things you need to do to make this work. Tim is joining me from the Alliance for Environmental Markets and Investments. We'll take a short time out, take care of the people that take care of us. More after this on WCPT.
By definition, the term endangered means that a species of organisms has a high probability of becoming extinct. But some species have recovered. Currently in the United States, there are 750 plant and 496 animal species on the endangered species list. But in the last few years, some species have made a dramatic comeback. Perhaps the greatest comeback is the American bald eagle. The symbol of our nation was nearly eradicated and has been under protection since 1940 and hit an all-time low of only 417 nesting pairs in 1963. It's grown to nearly 10,000 pairs in 2011 and was taken off the endangered list in 2007. There is much to be done to keep nature in balance by the same factor that knocked them out of balance, humans. I'm Bill Curtis, and Earth Matters.
Hey Google, play WCPT.
Streaming Chicago's progressive talk from TuneIn.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Filling in today for Joan, Chicago media personality, John St. Augustine.
Larry, you're looking to purchase a home or refi your existing home? ? I'm asking you. Call Team Hochberg, your trusted local lender with nearly 800 five-star Google reviews. Here's a perfect example of how he can help out. To satisfy her divorce, Sally needed to refi and pay her ex-husband his share of the equity. Unfortunately, Sally didn't qualify on her own, so she asked her mother, Myra, to co-sign with her. Myra then called David to understand the risks of co-signing. David explained if Sally made her payments on time, there was little concern. But if Sally missed payments, Myra's credit would be negatively impacted and hinder her ability to secure new credit. So let's review this. After reviewing the risks and the rewards, Myra decided helping her daughter refi her ex-husband out of her life was worth the co-signing risk, and Team Hochberg is helping Sally refi with Myra as the co-signer. So if you're considering co-signing for a mortgage, you got to call Team Hochberg, 855 56David, or visit 56david.com. Team Hochberg's helped thousands of WCPT listeners, but they can't help you if you don't pick up the phone and give them a tinkle on the Amici, 855-563-2843, or visit that website you know and love, 56david.com. AMC Equal Housing Lender, NMLS 643114. Tim Mayle is joining me this afternoon. We're talking about environmental type things. Tim, can you explain what a environmental market is like? What is it people be investing in? What qualifies as that?
Yeah. So there are companies across the U.S., around the world, really. The industry has really grown, about $14 billion in sales in 2025. An environmental asset might be a stream that flows through a community where the property that the stream is on is private land, and the stream has eroded over years through damage, from things done long ago to it that don't fix themselves. So an environmental asset that might sell on a market like this is someone taking that private property, putting protection in place so it'll stay in natural condition, and taking that stream and repairing its banks, repairing the flow of the river, restoring native plants so it's wonderful habitat again, and then doing all that to meet a government standard and getting approval to sell it to somebody else who needs to buy it or wants to buy it for some reason. That's what an environmental asset might look like in this market.
Are the people you go to capital and investment types, are they getting more and more on board with the green stuff?
They really are. Even though politics has gone up and down, the market has just kind of grown year after year. The U.S., so the scale of this industry in the United States is about 73,000 direct jobs involved in environmental restoration. That's bigger than coal mining, or steel and iron, milling. So it's a lot of people with higher than average wages across the U.S. economy. And the U.S. companies, the U.S. market is so good at this point that we actually attract investments from pension funds in Europe, pension funds in Canada, because America has the best market in environmental assets like these of anywhere in the world. And that's a pretty cool thing that not only do we have the jobs and the domestic side of this, but other countries look at us and send their money here.
I never forget. I never understood why when Hillary Clinton was running for president that she didn't go to coal country and say, we're going to pay you the exact same amount, but you don't have to go to coal mine. We're just going to have you build solar panels. Because if you go to the Kentucky, the National Coal Mine Museum in Kentucky, it's run by solar power. And I thought to myself, that's like the ultimate irony, to know that there's industries, because Tim, I think some people don't realize there are actual industries where you can earn a living that are green-based, that has a return on investment, not just for the person in it, but the people that are getting behind it. That's growing more and more. So whether you dismiss wind turbines or solar panels or whatever, there is a business there. There is a model there. When I was a kid, I think one person that I knew even considered anything was alternative energy, and now it's becoming the way of the world. So this is still kind of a time to get on board with this early, isn't it?
I think that's right. It's just growing all the time, right? It's there's a whole bunch of different types of markets. You mentioned energy. I mentioned habitat restoration. There's also just amazing application of technology in agriculture now to figure out how to make food better and with lower costs for things like fertilizer and herbicide. And all of that has got just kind of enormous potential for return for good jobs and good wages. So it really is. It just keeps growing. And if you talk to investors who have some sort of diversified portfolio with a nature or an environmental line in it, they say it helps their return and it helps them avoid risks. And there's nothing to do with politics. It's just a fact, right? Like they look at that and they get better returns if they're taking environmental considerations to mind. I
think that the environmental movement, for lack of a better term, has been coming on for a very, very long time, and you can only push the American people so far. So we're going to run back real quick to that I told this story before on the air, but might as well redo it again because that's what it's all about, is these stories we live our lives by, and the moments you have during those stories where they make a decision or a turning point comes. And my dad used to empty the oil from his car in the sewer when I was a kid.
Wow.
But it's because everybody else's dad used to dump it in the sewer or on the street, and he'd wash it down with a hose into the sewer. And this went on for quite a while. And I remember finally asking my dad, well, Dad, is that a good idea? And he's like, well, it just goes in the sewer. And I'm like, well, in his mind, it just stopped there. Of course it doesn't. But that wasn't even his own fault. He just never gave much thought to it after that. Well, it wasn't too long after that the whole Cuyahoga River thing happened, and the river was literally on fire. There was so much combustible material in that river that it self-immolated, for lack of a better term. That changed his habits a little bit. All of a sudden, it wasn't going in the sewer. It was going to the Chicago River, which went to Lake Michigan, and it goes out to the Great Lakes. And from that point on, then he didn't do, I mean, he had a little bit of an upgrade. Then he would put like a can underneath, catch the 5 quarts of oil, then he would store the can under our front porch, which wasn't great either. But at least he kept it from going to the sewer. And eventually, then all of a sudden, these, oil change places started popping up, and you could take your used oil there. So just in a space of a few years, maybe a decade, he went from putting it in the ground or in the sewer, under the porch, and then collecting it, taking it to these oil places. And those oil places made a ton of money refining the used oil. So that in itself is the kind of example I use when I'm like, just because the way things are doesn't mean they're going to stay that way. And if you can get in on this stuff early enough and come up with an idea or an antidote for some of these environmental challenges, you're going to do all right.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite a story. And, the kind of pieces of it are a bit of information and an easy-ish solution, right? And a solution that you can actually show makes a difference. And you got all those elements there. And there's so many ways where we can make little changes that end up having a pretty big difference. And the little changes don't have to be, all that hard.
Tim, last couple minutes we have together, tell the folks listening basically all over the world about this conference you have coming up next year. It's a big deal. You guys have been doing it a long time. From what I understand, all the pieces around it, I've heard bits and pieces from Carly and some of the other folks at your organization about how this is, no pun intended, grown environmentally on its own over the years. Tell me about this big deal.
Yep. Dallas, Texas, April 26th to 29. It's the 30th conference on environmental markets. It attracts people from all around the world. They aren't just, the experts in the industry. They're interested people. They're people who need to buy an environmental asset, who are finding new ways, like scientists, to restore them. And it brings together all those people, both to talk about the big picture and then to talk about, individual projects, individual cases, whether it's, a new set of restoration projects in the country of Colombia or in England, which has amazing investments going on right now in making nature better for people, or it's a project in Tennessee or Illinois or Wisconsin that might help wildlife or water quality. And usually the conference brings together a few hundred people, 500 people, lots of different workshops and roundtables and panels to participate in. It's a really fun conference, and it's, people in boots and hard hats and people in suits.
I like that, boots and hard hats and suits. So what's the big takeaway that you've been involved in this all these years? You've done a lot of different things, obviously well-schooled in so many different venues and things like that and avenues of this work. What's your big takeaway after all this time? I mean, anybody that I've ever talked to that's in the environmental stuff deeply as you are, they're always seeing the return on their investment, their time, their energy, their resources. But you've been at this quite a while. What's your big takeaway at this point in your career?
Big takeaway, right? There's a lot of bad news in the world, and the environment. Some of that's tied to the environment. My big takeaway is just how good we've gotten at protecting and enhancing the environment, whether it's at the edge of a farmer's field or in a degraded area, downbeaten area of a city that needs a revitalization, in which you can put nature back, or someplace out, in the woods. And, humans have become really, really good at fixing it. And that just gives me enormous optimism. We talk about like the next 20 years as being decades of, restoration of nature. And, we have the skills that know how to do that. And I wouldn't have thought that when I started my career. I would have thought that, it's one and done. If we don't protect it as it was, created or evolved, it's gone. And maybe that's still a better way to go. But given how many places are damaged, there's just so much potential to fix nature in ways that create huge benefits. So I just have a lot of optimism that we're just going to get even better at that.
If you want to know more about the Alliance for Environmental Markets and Investments, you can go to aemi.org. That's aemi.org. If you want to know about this fantastic conference they're having in Dallas, Texas, April 26th and 29th next year, you go to environmentalmarketsconference.com. That's environmentalmarketsconference.com. Learn how to invest in the environment, mitigation, banking, environmental markets, nature-based solutions, hard hats and suits. You got to love a group like that. Tim, I appreciate you taking the time today, and best of luck to what you guys are doing there.
You bet. Have a great day.
Thanks. All right, we'll take a short time out. Take care of the people that take care of us. Coming up in just a few minutes, I got a friend of mine on. You're not going to believe this guy and the road he's been on. Dino Miliotis will join me after this on WCPT.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Filling in today for Joan, Chicago media personality, John St. Augustine.
Joan, hopefully, will be back on Wednesday, and then we'll see how all that rolls itself out. She's a little bit under the weather and making her way back to the microphone. Tomorrow, for you early birds on Chew's Views, Richard Chew will be talking to Tom Moore, Senior Fellow for Democracy and Government at the Center for American Progress and former Chief of Staff to former Federal Election Commission Chair Ellen Weintraub. Lisa Stark will also be joining him, former reporter for ABC News, Al Jazeera America, and PBS NewsHour, along with Ian Cameron, former ABC News executive producer. A lot of formers on there. And Kate Lindholm Goldfinch, immigration attorney and CEO of Lincoln Goldfish Law in Austin. And then on Wednesday, he'll be joined in the studio by Congresswoman Robin Kelly. He'll also talk that day to Congressman Nikki Baczynski. Choose Views weekday mornings, 6 to 8 o'clock Central Time, WCPT AM, the Heartland Signal website, tune in, YouTube, Facebook, and everywhere else you can find them. So you better buckle up for this one. So let me just set the tone and the tenor for the next, 20 minutes or so. Back in the day, I'm going back, never mind, who was president? Can't even remember. Is that long ago? Part of the way I earned a living was in sports memorabilia. I just kind of fell into it because at the time, this would have been 92, 93, I worked with Walter Payton on his foundation. And one of the big projects we had was a lithograph of Walter that was done, like Andrew Gorlofsky was the name of the artist. And Andy came up with 3 renderings of Walter, and, they all had different edition sizes. And my job at the time was to find corporations that may want to invest in these and use them in their businesses and stuff like that. And right after they rolled out, I'd never forget this, the first meeting we had, it was like Kmart, which doesn't exist anymore. And we had all these big hoo-has from Kmart come into the Payton offices. At that time, it was on Martingale Road in Schaumburg. And they all came in the morning, and of course, they're all excited to meet Walter Payton, who's the greatest bear that ever lived. And we're all sitting in his conference room, and there's no Walter, and there's no Walter, and there's no Walter. This goes on like half hour, and we're stalling and telling jokes and making coffee and all this kind of stuff. And finally, Walter's assistant comes over and taps me on the shoulder, and she said, Walter's been downstairs in the parking garage just talking to the guys down there. Is it time for him to come up yet? It's been a half hour. Tell him to get his you-know-what up here. So he comes up, and he greets them all, and of course, they're all fawning over him and all like that. And at the time, my son was only 2 years old, and sometimes I would bring him with me to the office. And so we're sitting in this conference room, and in the middle of the table was Walter's number one kryptonite, which was those Starlight Mints, those hard candy peppermint things, bowls of them everywhere throughout the place. So he's eating these things like they're literally like they're candy. And at one point, the meeting's kind of dragging on, and Walter's attention span's about that of a 5th grader. And he takes my son, Andy, and off they just leave the room. And I'm talking business with the Kmart big hoo-has, and they just toddle off. Okay. So we wrapped the thing up, and of course, he made enough presents, and they were going to do something anyway, so it was kind of a foregone conclusion. So I wrapped it up, said goodbye to them, and they all leave. And I'm like, where is Peyton, and where's my kid at? So I finally make my way down to his office, and the door's cracked just a little bit. And here's what I see. I'll never forget this. I see the greatest running back in the history of the National Football League on the floor with my son, and they had taken golf tees off the wall and set them up like bowling pins, and he's in golf balls to bowl with. And they're having the time of their friggin' life, man. I didn't even want to interrupt it, but we had to go home. That's what I remember working for that. But out of all that, you start meeting a lot of different people. And so somehow, some way, shape, or form, I was put in touch with a guy named Ron Santo Jr. And people in Chicago know Ron Santo, of course, the great third baseman for the Chicago Cubs Hall of Famer. His son, Ron Jr., and I connected. And somehow out of all that came this opportunity to work on a project with Joe DiMaggio of fine art. And so these things just fall in my lap, and I'm doing the best I can to kind of juggle them and figure them out. And I don't think I'm a sports broker by any means, but this is something that's put in front of me, and you got to earn some cash, and it's Chicago, and I'm a hustler, and let's figure it out. So the first meeting I went to about this project was in the offices of the artist named Carlo Benenati. He was another big famous sports artist. And walking in there and big high, ceilings and the whole thing. And the guy that was financing the project was named Joe Aurelio. And if you know Aurelio Pizzas, you know where Joe Aurelio started and really made his bones in the pizza business. So all this is going on. And then this other guy walks in. It's just me, Joe Aurelio, Carlo Benenati, Ron Santo Jr., and this other guy comes walking in. And this guy, he is short in stature, but he has this presence about him like he runs the building or something. I'm like, who is this guy? And he walks up to me and he grabs my hand and really digs. He goes, my name's Dino Miliotis. Who the hell are you? I'll never forget it. That was a long time ago. And Dino Miliotis went on to great fame and fortune and a lot of different things, but he also knows what the bottom of the barrel is like and, came through clean and sober from alcohol and drug addiction. And I had a conversation with him last week on my podcast. I had to have him come back and recreate this for a live audience. And my friend Dino joins us today. Dino.
Hey, man, you have a memory like a steel trap.
I don't remember anything else, but I remember that.
I don't remember being so rude to you.
You weren't rude. You're just forward. It's just who you are.
I love it.
How you doing, buddy? It's so good to talk to you again.
You too.
So let's just recreate a little bit before we start going on to some other things about how you got involved with all that too, because your story coming to, we all came at different angles. I don't know how Ron Jr. got involved, but that's up to him. But how did you come to that thing with DiMaggio?
Well, oddly enough, I had hired that artist, Carlo Benenati, 10 years earlier because I hired him to do the art for my own collector plate that I wanted to launch. Mm-hmm. And the plate project didn't go very well, but we stayed in touch. So all of a sudden, 10 years later, he calls me out of the blue and says, hey, we're doing this thing with Joe DiMaggio. We need you. We need your help. You're a great marketer. Help us with this project. So that's kind of how I got involved.
Well, you definitely were involved, my friend. And so one of the things that and again, whether it's a steel trap or not, but you make an impression, let's put it that way. I'm sure anybody that knows you says, yeah, he makes an impression and sticks with you. And I just remember thinking about you, this guy is intense, he's really interesting, and he's got like a sixth sense about him. Somehow, some way, shape, or form, he figures out ways to turn things around no matter what happens in his life. And that's just in the first time we met. But watching you operate and work with these things and coming up with ideas, sitting in meetings about what we could do with these. And you got to call it what it is. Mr. Aurelio put $1 million of his own money, correct, to put this together?
1 million, yeah, absolutely.
$1 million bucks.
The biggest signing of its time. The first time you put fine art and a sports celebrity on there. And DiMaggio's signature, if you remember, was almost a foot long. Remember?
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah. So it was something special, but, they had produced it, they had signed it, and didn't tell anybody about it. So when I came on board, it was like 6 months after the fact. And they're like, well, sales aren't really that good. I'm like, does anybody know about it? Well, no. And I said, okay, it's time to let them know. Yeah. Next thing you know, USA Today came out, baby, and it was all downhill from there.
It was so much fun and so much stress at the same time. And I think to myself, the audacity you have as a young man or a young woman trying to make your way in the world and knocking on doors and won't take no for an answer and, just trying to figure stuff out. And like I said, at the time, I think I was teaching high school part-time. I was dabbling into sports stuff because of Peyton. I didn't expect anything like this, but I'm also not an idiot. And I thought, this is Joe DiMaggio and this is an opportunity. Did you feel the same way?
I did. You were always the tactician. You were very calculating. You wanted to know everything. And let me see all three. What are the sizes? I remember. I'm like, oh God, when is he going to stop? But then I think that after you realized, hey, how special this is? Because there's nothing like it, dude. Yeah. Nothing. And all of a sudden, you made the first sale. Do you remember? You called me and you're like, hey, Dino, is it okay if you check on the number of all three of them? Because I have somebody who wants to buy number 56 on all three pieces.
Yes.
And you called it the suite.
Yes.
And And you coined that phrase, and you got a premium price for those too, by the way.
I sure did. I will never forget going to see this guy who didn't want anything to do with art, because sports and arts were not really put together back then.
Right.
So this was the first thing, and he had done some memorabilia stuff. He knew Peyton, blah, 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 and all these kind of things. I said, let me just show you this thing. And I probably learned this from you. The most effective way for me was to leave him in the box. I didn't walk in with him, walking out, and slowly just pull, so that it's kind of pushing on the cardboard there. Pull it right out. And I put the first one out, and he kind of looked and tilted his head. I put the middle one out, which was the big one. I think there was 1,000 of those. There was 750 of the silver one, and 250 of the gold one. And by the time they were all out, he looked, he cocked his head, he goes, how much for all three?
Yep.
And I'm like, and the 56 thing, I want number 50s. And I thought, what is going on here? Because now it's very specific. He owns the suite right across the board, all 56s. No one else can have them. And so then I started to figure it out.
Yeah. And you called me up. You're like, hey, this guy wants 56 on all of them. What should I charge? I'm like, 10,000.
Exactly.
And you're like, okay. And it was, and that started everything. It became real. Yeah. And you're just like, wow, holy smokes, this is pretty good.
I will tell you that I eventually then took a small inventory home with me, and I don't know that we signed him out on it, where everybody was on a handshake deal back then, brother. Mr. Rilio, God bless him and God rest his soul, he trusted, really, with the three of us, you and I and Ron Jr., did most of the work to sell those things. And I took them home in an inventory, and I'm like, I don't want to tell anybody they're even in the house, And I would take them out here and there. And one of the ones that still, I don't know where most of them went, but I can tell you one on the northwest side of Chicago. I talk about La Villa Restaurant all the time. I've been going there since the 70s. And I went there to propose them because it's an Italian restaurant, Dino. Come on, man.
Yeah, every Italian restaurant in Chicago had one hanging on its wall.
I know.
You know this.
I know that. And I took it in there, and it turned out it was the gold edition, which was like the premium edition. It was only 250, and somebody had misnumbered. It was like 216 to 216 instead of 216 to 250.
That's worth more money.
Exactly what I thought.
Bam.
Bam. So anyway, it was up there for many, many years at the bar at La Villa. Now it's up in the office and stuff, but that's the only one that I know exists. Have you ever seen those anymore?
Oh my God! Every time I visit Chicago, I always go to an Italian restaurant and I see them.
Yeah,
they're everywhere.
Yeah,
they're everywhere.
Cool stuff.
You just have to go. Yeah, exactly. Or the Italian American Sports Hall of Fame. For sure, they're in there.
Right. So all that happens. We have a great time. As life happens, people go their separate ways and things like that. I'm going to skip the DiMaggio. Should I tell the DiMaggio story of us in New York?
Yeah.
All right.
Wait,
you want to tell it?
Yeah, you got snubbed. That's all
we call it the snub.
Yes, but forever known as the snub. So you put on your Sunday best. We go out to the show in New York where we hear that Joe DiMaggio and his lawyer are going to be there. And we have the serigraphs all up there, the lithographs all up there, and expecting, hey, for him to endorse it, he got paid $1 million. He didn't even want to be touched.
Yeah.
And what did he tell you? He said, this is the ugliest rendition of me.
Yeah. This is the least handsome or something like that I've ever seen in my life. And I'm thinking, for $1 million, I'd walk in naked, jump on my head, jump up and down and shake your hands. He didn't want to be touched. His lawyer's like, don't get close to him. And I knew he had a reputation for that stuff, but it was the night before the event opened, and we were just a bunch of us there, a few of us. We were with Tito Landrum, who played for the Cubs. We stayed out there with him in New York. And I think we did pretty well the next day, but all I remember was the snub.
The snub.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, it was horrible. But you know what?
You learn.
It was a special time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know what? That was the pinnacle, because you went your way and you had a tremendous career, and congratulations to you on all your success. I took another turn and I went my way, and here we are meeting back 33 years later. It's amazing. It
really is amazing. When we come back from this break, I want to talk about how things changed for you right around the time we were all working together. And I think Ron Jr. owns us lunch or something still, doesn't he? I would think.
Yeah, good luck.
Yeah. Dino Miliotis is joining me. We're going to come back on the other side of this and talk about the roller coaster of life he's been on and how to overcome adversity no matter what it is. Back with more after this on WCPT.
If humans cause climate change, then why did the dinosaurs go extinct? Asks a Florida congressman. When GOP Congressman Jeff Miller was asked if he was concerned that voters are starting to believe the majority of scientists who agree that human industry and development are contributing factors to climate change, the congressman cited the fact that no humans were around to blame when the dinosaurs went extinct. There are a few creationists who think life was like a Flintstones cartoon. But the fact is that 97% of scientists agree that human activity is accelerating weather patterns with the buildup of greenhouse gases over the past century. As the political races heat up, voters are starting to decide for themselves what actions need to be taken to slow down the human impact on climate change, even with dinosaurs in Congress denying the overwhelming evidence. Earth Matters. I'm Bill Curtis.
WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Filling in today for Joan, Chicago media personality, John St. Augustine.
I'm just sitting here chuckling to myself because you don't talk to somebody for 30 years plus and you pick up right where you left off. And I remember how calculating I was. I don't know why I thought it was so important to know the size, the weight, and the height of these things, but that's kind of how my mind works. And here's Dino like, just hurry it up or let's get going. Dino Miliotis has ridden the roller coaster of success from the pinnacle of, we talked about with this DiMaggio thing. And then right from that point, you went into this thing that millions of people knew about. I will never forget reading about you in People magazine thinking, can't be the same guy. What did you do?
And it all started in Chicago. I'll forever be grateful to Oprah and the city of Chicago, brother. I'll tell you that much. So I invented the first ever insect repelling wristband back in 1996. And what started as a question of what if we can take a plastic and put in lemongrass, geranium, and citronella oil. 12 months later, I'm in 63 countries. I sold over 30 million of them, and everybody wanted a piece of me. I mean, I was on everything, and I was overwhelmed. I mean, you sit down with Oprah, you're in People magazine. I mean, it's like it's surreal.
Yeah.
And so it was just a wild time. And of course, 30 years old or 31 years old, whatever I was back then. I mean, I just wasn't ready for prime time. So, you know, what should have been just the absolute pinnacle of my life, and for a lot of times, I mean, it was, but I also developed an addiction to drugs and alcohol because that was my bravery. You know, I'm going to do this before an interview, and I'm going to sound great, you know, and it just kind of steadily progressed where, you know, it was something I carried with me for 25 years, almost 25 years, yeah.
One of the things you talk about is that isolation is the absolute worst thing, or I would say factor when it comes to addiction.
Absolute worst. I mean, and mine, by the way, happened right smack dab in the middle of the COVID lockdown. So for extra isolation, right?
Yeah.
You know, I went to treatment like millions of people before me and millions, you know, every year. And, you know, I learned a lot. But one of the things is, I will tell you, not all care models are created equal. I mean, everybody says everybody recovers differently. You have your own journey. But at the same time, it's sort of a one-size-fits-all mentality. And I had a difficult time inside treatment, and I had a horrible time when I got out of treatment, because that's when life starts again. You leave the protective bubble, and you go out in the real world, and you're supposed to perform, right? And that was extremely difficult for me, John.
You know, one of the things you talked about in our other conversations was this 90% thing about you're ready to check out a rehab and you guys all get in the big kumbaya circle and look to your left and look to your right. What did the facilitator say that jarred you so much?
It shocked me. So, I mean, 30 days, you have what they say, you coin out. They give you a coin. Everyone is special. My counselor handpicked one for me that said recovery is discovery. And they just kept saying it around. I didn't know what that meant for several years after, just to show you how naive I was. But we're all happy and cheering and, oh, we made it. And she says, now listen, look to your left and look to the people to your right. 90% of the people won't make it, and some of you will die. And I was like, oh my gosh, That's reality check. That's when it really hit me. Like, I haven't even started to recover. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So when I got out, you had to unlearn, relearn, and almost like forget about your past. But, adopt recovery as a lifestyle. And it was really tough. I mean, you know how tenacious I am. And but what kept me going is, here's the entrepreneur in me. I can't be the only one feeling like this, right? There's millions of people that feel like this. So how do you do it? What happens after you leave 4 walls of treatment, this protective bubble, and you go out in the real world? Because you know what? 17 days, 28 days, 30 days in rehab is not enough. And everybody knows that, which is why we have this horrible relapse rate.
So, yeah, you go into this isolation because of COVID, and I know you had a couple of real near-miss moments there. We were talking, you talked about having, one point in your life, your garage filled with all kind of toys, and you could write checks to do whatever you want to do, and all the rest that goes along with it. But the demon, I should say, the devil inside, got progressively worse, and you couldn't buy your way out of it or sell your way out of it or anything out of it. And was it just a gradual wake-up call even when you got out of rehab, or was there something that especially outside of that moment that took place, you said enough's enough? Was there a defining moment?
Going in, the enough's enough moment was sitting in a bloated house with all the toys in the garage. I'm drinking a bottle of vodka, a handle, no glass. Why waste a glass? And I'm crying. And I said, I have all this, and I have nothing, like not zero, less than zero. And I knew I had to do something because, I reached a point where I was not functioning at all. And you're talking to a highly functioning guy for so many years. That was the defining moment that got me into treatment. The defining moment outside of treatment, where I stopped the pity party and said, you know what, I got to get my act together. Believe it or not, was thinking about, how can I empower other people? How can I raise them up? How can I give them hope? How can I help those who I know are feeling like I am? And so that's what got me to write a book. Because I was writing a book, I forgot all about my problems and started focusing about, putting raw energy into every page I was writing, that with the hopes of helping somebody else. Just one. That was the goal.
So you wrote the book called There Is No Box. You can get it on Amazon. What was and the reviews I've read, raw, unfiltered, in your face, typical 3 words that would describe you anyway. But all this stuff was pouring out of you, and it was more than just one person to help. This book has made a serious difference in the lives of thousands of people. And so I told you this before, and I think a lot of people fall in this category. If you had never gone through this, you really can't speak to it in a way that's effective. You have to, have your ass handed to you, I think, in order to come out of it. And I remember, if you don't have that, you're just talking from theory. But when you go through it and you survive it, you're talking from experience. It's a big difference.
Yeah, brother, I'm wearing general stripes in the Army of Recovery, and I'm proud of it. And unless I did it myself, there's no way I'd be able to connect with people now. Not on this project that we're doing, not at any time. But that book resonated with thousands and thousands of people. It got me on the social platforms, recovery platforms with literally millions of people. And just like we talked about, nothing's by chance. You get involved with a good group of like-minded people, and all of a sudden, guess where we're back to 30 years later?
Right.
Another band.
Yeah. So this is like the whole build up to the whole deal. The DiMaggio's is great, and the plates are great, and all stuff. That's all well and good, but it comes totally full circle for you.
Yeah. This is, last time was, I'm not going to say luck. Well, maybe a little, but that was fun. This is personal. This is a recovery band called Keep. And basically, kind of touching on what we were talking about, when you leave those 4 walls of treatment, you're out of the protective bubble and you're out in the real world where you have to unlearn, relearn, and take on recovery as a lifestyle for the rest of your life. It doesn't go away. How do you do that? How do you reconnect with so many people that suffered alongside with you? How do you reconnect with friends and family and loved ones that you know as well as I do? Addiction is not only something that I suffer from, but there's 5 people that suffered along with me, right? How do we reconnect and rebuild trust? And so we developed this Keep Band, which basically takes biometric insights and information, and it compiles them in such a way where it will give you ownership of your own recovery. It'll give you guidance. It allows for journaling. It allows you to connect to your circle of support, even your counselor, therapist, sponsor, your loved ones, your family, your friends, right? You can choose who you want to let in. And with a mindset that it takes a village.
Right.
And like I was telling you about before, I mean, we all use navigation to get places these days, right?
Right.
And as good as navigation is, you may miss a turn. And what does navigation do? It redirects and recalculates, and it guides you back to your destination, right? That's how the Keep Band was modeled, to keep you on track, to give you signals, to give you warning signs, and to also connect and communicate with the loved ones that care about you most.
I'm on your website, www.bookdinonow.com, and there's this big picture of you looking over my shoulder. I'm thinking, God, it's 1990 over again. it's kind of creepy, actually. But we got to wrap it up here. But if people want to get the Keep Band, find out more about you, where they can get involved. I know you're on LinkedIn. I know you're on Facebook. You could do the www.bookdinonow.com as well.
I'll do one better. You could go to Instagram and follow me there, and I'm going to give you a number. You could text me if you want.
Go ahead.
312-586-2628.
One more time.
312-586-2628. Yeah, that's crazy. I want to talk to people. I want to let you know what's happening, because when it rolls out in the States, it's already in Canada. When it rolls out in the States, it's going to be the greatest thing for addiction recovery.
I'm going to tell you something, brother. I'm saying this publicly, too. We have not seen each other for 33 years. Right. And I do not believe in coincidences at all. I think that everything shows up exactly right on time. And I think that our conversation today, the one we had last week, whoever's out there in the world listening need to hear this. You need to get a hold of this guy. He's the real deal. And nothing but good can come out of it. So I appreciate your time. Dino, one more time on the phone number if people want to reach out to you.
It's 312-586-2628.
Fantastic. That's the Keep bracelet. Dino, we'll talk next time we talk. You come to Chicago, we got to put on the feed bag at some Italian restaurant.
Yeah, we'll sit under a Joe DiMaggio and reminisce. Lots to talk about, Johnny.
Lots to talk about, brother. You take care of yourself.
Thank you for having me on. Thank you. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Back with more after this right here on WCPT.
The Thom Hartmann radio program provides all of the intelligence, information, and insight you'll need to win the water cooler wars. Weekdays 11 to 2 right here on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk, where facts matter. This is WCPT 820, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Filling in today for Joan, Chicago media personality, John St. Augustine.
Hey, just a reminder that Heartland Signal has a new free newsletter every week. Heartland Signal's head of research, Aaron Kleinman, delivers Radio Free America, highlighting stories that matter in state politics but aren't getting enough attention. What a great friggin' idea that is. Subscribe today at heartlandsignal.com/newsletters, and you can get it right in your mailbox. So today is the first day of class in the Chicago public school system. And whenever I get into this chair on Milwaukee Avenue, two things come to mind. One is about a block, just a couple blocks up from the studio, there used to be a bar there called Lasco's, and I was a bouncer there. But that's for a different show. I also think about the other way down Milwaukee Avenue is the high school that I graduated from in never mind what year it was. It's a long time ago. And how much I think about Milwaukee Avenue running back and forth through my life and the places I've been and the people that lived off that street and all that kind of thing. And over the last decade plus, I've gotten very involved in the Alumni Association. It kind of resurrected the one that was a little bit benign at the time and all that goes along with that. We've been doing a big event every year. This year, the Bulldog Bash is on October 3rd. It's a fundraiser for Schurz High School. It actually just covers things that the CPS budget doesn't cover, which gets to be more and more every year. So we really focus our efforts on the STLS kids, which are students in temporary living situations, which did not exist when I was at school there in the mid-70s. So All that in my mind as I was driving in today. And when I found out yesterday that I'd be sitting in for Joan, I had to put a call into Dr. Heidy Moran, who's the principal of Schurz, and see where things are at with her, take a temperature a little bit on the school year this year, some of the pros and cons, the ups and downs, the challenges, and the things that are working, and she joins me now. Dr. Moran, welcome back.
Thank you for having me. Always a great time to sing Schurz's praises for all to hear.
That's right. By the way, Schurz beat Steinmetz Friday night in football. Let's go. Had to put that in. I don't know what's going to happen next week, but we won that game. So, first day of class, what's the temperature like over there?
Just amazing. Lots of positive energy and lots of families actually hearing some great things about everything that we're doing. You know, whatever, regardless of what's going on outside of our school walls, the kids were here. They were early. Parents, we had to kick a few parents out.
Oh.
So excited to see their kids ready to learn and ready to take advantage of the amazing opportunities we have for their kids here.
I need to do a shout out to the front ladies in the front office. Because let's call it what it is, Doc. They run the school. You got to call it what it is. And many times you and I have had meetings over the years, and I would sit on the bench waiting in the front office, and I would watch the kids walk up and talk to Lucille and Patty and everybody else that's involved in their Dyra, and they have this connection with these kids that, listen, I was scared to death of the ladies in the front office when I went to school there. It's amazing, really, what they're able to do.
Yeah, things have definitely transformed. We know all of the students, the ins and outs, and it's great. Making those connections really become essential when these kiddos are facing some intense challenges, and to have some trusted adults that they can rely on really makes their high school experience that much better.
It's so interesting you brought that up, because I mentioned the STLS kids, which has been the focus of the Alumni Association's efforts for almost 10 years now. And when we first went in and met with Doc Rodriguez, who he recommended you actually to be part of the leadership bridge and all that went with it that led you to becoming a principal. We sat down with Doc Rodriguez and said, how can we help? We're starting to raise money with this thing. What do you need? A new scoreboard? You need helmets? He said, we need to help the kids that are homeless. And all three of us about fell on the floor. And it's a challenge that if it was going on back then, we didn't hear about it. I mean, there might have been a few here and there, but it's certainly not to the degree it is now, that the CPS actually has to have a budget for every school for those that are not in homes that we would call traditional.
Yeah, and they actually, the CPS does set aside some budget monies for our students in temporary living situations, but, the challenges, they just keep coming at them. Housing, rents are so incredibly expensive, and you have, families getting really creative with where they live so they can, put food on the table and get their kids to school, and then we kind of fill in the gaps. So the fundraising that you and the alumni do in connection with our friends of Schurz, it just really helps to bridge those gaps and make sure that these high schoolers have the best possible experiences that they can, so that they can, be on their way to all these post-secondary options, whether it be college, whether it be military, be a trade, so that, they can support themselves and their families in the future.
Let's talk about trade real quick, because when I was there, you had electric shop, wood shop, auto shop. There's all kind of shops. Is that making a comeback in any way, shape, or form over the last few years?
At Schurz it is. We have a great automotive program, a health sciences program, pre-engineering, business, and digital media. And all of those students are just coming out with some amazing skills. They can't be replaced with AI, by the way. Mm-hmm. And so it's going to really set them up for success in the future.
What's the challenge now? I mean, you'd have to be living under a rock to not know that once again, the CPS system is in difficulty with finances, and that they're banking on, no pun intended, money from the state, which usually happens every year, but nobody knows what it's going to be. The challenge you have of even keeping the ship afloat, we got to call it what it is, Doc, is more than, they don't teach you this stuff in college when you're becoming, a principal and all the rest of the educational work. This is a very, a much bigger area that you've had to explore and kind of braille your way through. What's that like for you to know that's also on your plate outside of just running Schurz High School?
One of the things they teach you in grad school is you have to focus on your locus of control, and that's what we do. And so all we can do is make sure we are set up, we are ready for the students to learn on day one, which happened today, by the way. I was in about 50 classes today, seeing them get started on learning.
Wait. Did you say you went to 50 classes?
Yeah.
You walked in the room?
We go in, pop in, and I'll be uploading some of the pictures on Facebook. We try to show parents in our community what happens in our school building. But yeah, they got started right away and hit the ground running, and that's all we can do is focus in on learning, making sure these students learn how to be wonderful human beings and take some skills with them. And we just weather the storm. Will just continue to happen in the news, et cetera. But we know what we're about here, and we come here every day and do our very best for our students and try to ignore the noise as much as possible.
Late last year, you took in an influx of students, and it was a kind of unique situation. Kind of just review that and how you guys all handled that. How many kids was it?
We ended up admitting 245 new students from 2 nearby schools that were closing. I have to tell you, we were not anticipating them to all enroll here, but something interesting happened, and it was when we had our own student leaders at Schurz. We sat them down. We said, okay, a lot of you guys had transferred in or come in from another country or from the suburbs at some point when you came into Schurz. What was it like for you, and how could we make that experience better? And they became our student leaders. So when it came around to our new enrollees coming in, just word of mouth spread that this was a really great place to go to school. And, we have an amazing building and facilities and programs. We've got an amazing pool. We have our 3 gyms. We have an amazing athletics and sports program. And in addition to all of our academic programs, the IB program, dual language. And so when they came in and they saw, wow, this is everything you got to offer, the marketing just did it. It did itself. The word of mouth was the reason why I think we got so many of those students join in and just become a part of our Schurz family.
Doc, I got to tell you, I never thought I'd hear the word amazing and pool in the same sentence. Because when I went there, we called it the swamp for good reason. But you've a couple upgrades over the years, I guess.
Oh, yeah. New pool pumps, and I got a nice facelift.
Nice. One of the most impressive things, well, there's a couple things about the school that's really impressive, is the architecture. It's a landmark. It's an amazing building. Is it not Bowen that's the sister school?
Yeah. Yes. And I think they just got landmark status this year, too.
Yeah. So same architect did that, did both schools. He had a whole run there during the late around 1908, 1909, 1910, somewhere in there, doing the architectural work for these schools. And, they've stood the test of time. But that library, which quite frankly, in all disclosure, Doc, I didn't spend a hell of a lot of time in there when I was at Schurz, just the way it was. I've been in there a couple times now with events we've had and alumni things. It is really like a showpiece. And a few years ago, they redid the murals that are in there. The Gustav murals were all redone. And what I also was very heartened by last time, as much as we live in a digital world, you still have a lot of books there.
We do, and we're trying to find the way to sort of rebuild our library and get our librarian reinstated, and then also kind of fix that roof, because our leaky roof is really that's what ruined the murals in the first place. But luckily, we were able to get a little bit of money from facilities, and they started to patch up parts of our roof, and so we're just hoping more trickles down so that we can maintain our beautiful building.
There's a legacy piece. I don't know how many Schurz Bulldogs are listening to this show. Quite frankly, I'll be real honest with you. I never thought I'd ever be on the radio, number one, and number two, much less talking about the high school I left almost 50 years ago. But when I ever had a chance to do it, I just have a real sense of pride. And I know that everybody goes to their shirt, whether it's Taft or Lane. I don't even like to say the word Lane, but anyway, my producer's chuckling it up over here because she knows. And all of these things, there's a great sense of pride when you go to a school and you have a great experience here and stuff like that. When you walk into a building, I got to ask this. I've never asked this of you because you have such a unique story and journey more than any other principal I think that's ever been at the helm there, because you came really you didn't speak English as a kid, and you worked your way up, and now you're in this multilingual school doing this great work. And by the way, I never once saw the principal in any class I was ever in. So already that's a big deal. So what do you feel like when you walk in and you know the history of this place? What's that like for you?
It's just amazing just knowing that Carl Schurz was an immigrant himself and was a trailblazer. But for me, I got brought into this country, didn't speak the language, but right away, school was my safe haven. And so many teachers along the way just went above and beyond. Talk about, the challenges that our students have, and our educators, they weren't just teachers, they were mentors. And really part of the reason I became a citizen in this country was my seventh grade teacher. I owe so much to getting into the high school programs that I did, getting through college. And so for me, that's part of the reason I'm so engaged with our students. It's so great to be able to give back and be able to create a school that is a safe haven and provides the students with all the tools they need so that they don't fall through the cracks. So that if it is a life situation that's holding them back, how can we help and support them? And if they have, if they have some hobbies and talents that we can go ahead and promote. We have our regular school day, but we are also a sustainable community school. So we have this grant. We do a lot of after-school programming for students and then also for community members and parents. So we started up a sewing program recently because some parents, had that talent. Yeah, and it's, bringing that back. And we have students who are into it and we're hoping to expand on that. But everything from that to cooking to fitness and just really making sure that community hub. I mean, I think, I don't know if that was your yearbook back in the 70s. They would have the Friday night open.
Yeah, it was, activity night.
Was it called?
Yep, activity night.
Yeah, so trying to bring some of that back.
And you talk about a sales job. So you're all day at school, and then you walk back in the middle of winter to go back to school again for 4 hours. I mean, that's a sales job, but we loved it. It was a place to go. So I've spent time in the digital lab and the media lab and stuff. And I got to tell you, it was such a kick to go back and go to those rooms. And obviously a lot of it looks the same, but obviously it's changed. And mostly because the kids that are there now, they seem just so young. I'm sure we all did back in the day. But I was a little bit of a hand and push into developing some podcast stuff for the school, using my radio experience and talk with these kids. And I kept thinking to myself, I wondered if anybody would have walked in one of my classes like that and said, hey, John, here's something you have a talent for and you can do this. And, like you mentioned here, it was just different time back then. We just want to go to school and do your thing and play football and leave or what have you. But the effort that I saw put into each one of these students, especially in the media lab and all the digital stuff, was remarkable. I mean, the educators, they're above and beyond the call of duty. I don't know where all these folks come from, but man, so impressive.
They're just so impressive. That's the right word. I shared a slide with our parents last week, and it was all of the accolades from just our staff, faculty recognition. And, I was talking about our former Fulbright scholars, Miss Scotton in the world language, Mr. Arseny in the science. And then we have a new one for this year, Miss Tomasetti in our English social science team. She's going to be a Fulbright scholar. So talk about talent. We have some amazing educators that pour their all into our students and then also get this amazing recognition, which we're so proud of them.
So last couple minutes we have together, I have two things. One is, every year we give out a scholarship in the name of the late, great Phil Larson, who for the most part worked with me in the early years to build the Bulldog Bash. Phil passed in 2020, and we started a scholarship for him, and it was mostly towards tech because he was a carpenter. We just didn't want to throw money at somebody. We wanted kids that really were going to give a return on investment for our efforts. So when we do the Bulldog Bash, we decide where those monies are going, and the first priority is always STLS, and the second priority is Phil Larson's scholarship because it directly can help a kid get into a job or a career that, like you said before, you can get right into it and start earning a living. And a lot of kids aren't built for college in the traditional sense. And so I didn't make it last year, but our good friend, Mr. Anderson, stepped in for me, and he called me afterwards. And the best part about it is these kids are getting the money, have no idea they're getting a check. It's the best thing in the world. You get up there and you tell this, we're a bunch of old guys up there telling this story of how it was when we were at Schurz back in 19, never mind, and blah, blah, blah. And then you call this kid's name out and they light up like a Christmas tree. And they walk up and they can't believe that this was given to them. And the number one thing Tim would tell me, he'd say, John, I wish you could see in the classes and the stuff like that after the fact when these students can't really understand why people who don't know them would help them. And that really sticks with us. So when I think of the alumni efforts, it's not just me or our team. It's all the people that attend the bash, the people that make the donations, all the sponsors that donate, things like the Chicago Bears and the Cubs and all the rest of the people who put stuff in, the Chicago Symphony, all these people that donate, they're all part of that. And so every time we write a check and that ripple effect takes place, that's a big deal to me. But the last part of this is, for me, what do you think is the greatest challenge that these kids face coming in off the street to go to any, even high school across the board, but at Schurz for sure? What is the biggest challenge they face that maybe those of us who went in the past wasn't even on our radar?
You know, I think even when I went to school, which was a little bit more recent than you, I think the difference was we could just focus on school, sports, being a kid. And nowadays, with all of the financial responsibilities and, you know, the inability to make a decent living off of one job. So you have a lot of our teenagers jumping in because they're going to be good helpers and good support system for their families, and they jump in and get jobs, I think, a little too soon, you know, during the school year. So I would say if there's anything, I think sometimes our youth is misunderstood as, you know, they're just apathetic and lazy, but at the same time, we've got kids working in the gig economy, you know, DoorDash and all that jazz, and they're putting in 40-hour weeks while they're going to school full time. So I think that's what it is. It's like we're expecting a lot out of our youth, and they're stepping up, but, you know, you can't do everything to your best effort if you're working so hard, you know, just to get the basics in there.
Do you have any big goals or plans for Schurz this coming school year?
Well, we've got just growing the number of students, you know, to that point, growing the number of students that can do some fun things during the school year. So increasing the participation in our extracurriculars is huge. And just going from there, we you know, kids usually come in and do school, and we know that the more things that they explore, the more doors that open for them. So it may sound a little basic, but just so much of bringing some of that joy back to our high schoolers, I think, will be important. So that's one of the goals. The other goal is really pushing our students to taking advantage of these internships and early college experiences. So they're taking dual credit, dual enrollment classes, and college credit bearing opportunities. So a little bit of balance there, right? A little bit of fun and some challenge. Fantastic.
Dr. Heidy Moran, the principal at Schurz High School, right down the block there, 3601 North Milwaukee Avenue. On behalf of all the Bulldog alumni, you do an amazing job there. You know, you make it look so easy. I know there's a lot of moving parts behind the scenes, but you and the ladies at the front and the whole staff. How many alumni are on staff there again? Do you know?
At last count, it was just about 30. So, yeah. And actually, I just met a whole bunch of parents they were Bulldog parents and sending their kids to us. So I'm humbled that they're trusting us to raise the next generation of Bulldogs. But for sure, everyone here at Schurz, John, is so grateful for the alumni support and our friends of and our neighbors and our alumni that are always there for us. And so we look forward to, no matter what's going on out there, we look forward to an amazing school year and just to build opportunities for all of our students.
Perfect. Well, if I don't see you before October 3rd, which is Bulldog Bash number 12, I will see you there for sure, Doc. Thanks so much for your time today. Good luck this year.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you something. It's so amazing to me. I mentioned earlier when I started this 29 years ago was kind of the first time this week I went on the radio, and I had little, if any, idea how long I would ever do this and why would I do this and all those other pieces. But as I sit here, almost 50 years since I walked out the door at Schurz High School in 1977, no idea what was going to happen in my life. I clearly remember walking across the stage, which is now, it's in Slocum Hall, which I think Slocum was the first principal at Schurz, but the stage is now named after the late, great Jeff Burke. So it's Jeff Burke's stage in Slocum Hall. And I remember walking across the stage, and James P. Maloney was the principal. And this is a guy, you know, not big of stature, but big of presence. And again, all he had to do was stand in the hallway with his arms folded. We all walked quiet. That was just the way it was. But I remember walking across the stage, and you do the shake and bake. You grab one hand, shake a hand, and then you get your diploma in the next. And I clearly remember taking a look, and all you can see, I mean, the auditorium is pitch dark, but I could see the clock on the far wall of the balcony in the back. It was like 10 minutes to 8. And I just had this weird flash like, I'll never be in this building again. be careful what you say, because that's not true. And to sit here all these years later and have a conversation with Dr. Moran and being as involved as I am, and some of the folks I know that are on part of the Bulldog Alumni Association team, and the Friends of Schurz that does the 501 part, and then the community. Every time we go out and ask for help, it always comes in. I mentioned before, for the last 7 years now, the Chicago Bears don't either sign football, sign helmets, something like that. That gets auctioned off. The Chicago Symphony Orchestra gives us tickets to great events, usually music and the movies. This year, I think it's How to Train Your Dragon Part 2, and you get tickets to go to that. We have Bulldog alumni that make things, and that goes into the silent auction. And our big get so far is a Brian Urlacher signed Hall of Fame helmet with a little figurine guy in a shirt and all that stuff. So you go in the door here. We charge $125 to get in the door. If you're an alumni, we'd love to see you. It's October 3rd at La Villa. You just go online to Facebook. We have a page. You can sign up there. But half the money we raise right out of the gate goes in the bank. We pay our bill at the restaurant. Best food you could ever get in the city, more than you could ever possibly eat in 2 lifetimes. You get to take home lefties. And the rest of the money goes in the bank, and we use that money judiciously over the next year to help the STLS kids and anything else we need to support Schurz. And to me, that's like the big get. I always feel wherever I've been fed, I got to pay back. And my 4 years at Schurz was great. I mean, it was high school. You know, you're not even a real human being yet at that point, but still, it made a big impact on me. I went back and taught there for a year and a half. I coached football there. That's where I thought my life would end up. Turns out life had other plans, and I'm on the friggin' radio. But anyway, glad to use this bully pulpit to help my alma mater, and wishing Dr. Moran, her staff, and the students at Schurz all good things this year. We're going to take a short time out. Come back after this break. I'm going to be talking with Paul Branke from the Glenview Historical Center about Coast Guard Helicopter 1459. Back after this.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Filling in today for Joan, Chicago media personality, John St. Augustine.
Back at it right here on WCPT. Tomorrow at this time will not be Joan. She'll be back on Wednesday. Her guest will be David Hochberg, Vice President Lending Tree for Team Hochberg at Homeside Financial, Illinois Congressman Bill Foster. I guess we're kind of wrangling for position to see who's going to be in that slot. But we're wishing well to Joan that she gets a quick recovery and feels better and pops back up on Wednesday as promised. So let me just give you a little quick synopsis here or story. I'm going to try and make this I got a half hour. Sit tight. This took 7 years to get to this point, so give me a break. So when I was stationed at NAS Glenview from 1980 to 1984, in the United States Coast Guard Aviation, we had a couple of hangars, we had a couple of helicopters in hangar, and one was 1459, and the other one I remember was 1446. These are HH-52As that were built in the mid-60s by Sikorsky Helicopter. And these were beasts of the East, no question about it. They were called flying lifeboats at the time. These are just these bulky, really cool, though, machines that I just thought were the most fantastic thing I'd ever seen. I had never planned on being in aviation. I thought I'd probably end up on a ship somewhere. How I got in the Coast Guard's a whole other story we're not going to get into now. But as it turned out, I was able to go to Coast Guard Air Station Chicago, where I thought I would launch my career. And I got on the list for what was called at the time ASM, which is Aviation Survivalman School, where you come up with all the survival equipment. They had a great shop. It was really cool stuff. I thought, that's what I want to do. Little did I realize the wait for the school was about 2.5 years to get in there. So I just stayed at the air station, biding my time, waiting to get into to this aviation school and make my career. And in the meantime, of course, you're hanging out doing everything else with everybody else. And it was a small station, probably 38, maybe 45 people at the most, including officers and all the rest that goes along with it. And it was a memorable time in my life, those 4 years. And as I recall, when it got down to about 2.5 years in, I started to get antsy thinking, maybe I don't want to stay in the Coast Guard anymore. And I didn't. My life went in a very different direction, but I never forgot my time there. And more importantly, the people I served with, the best of the best. I just got to call it what it is. The Coast Guard is a small service. We always have done more with less, probably always will. And it is a peacetime service. It's also a wartime service. We've lost everybody at D-Day in Vietnam and every other major conflict. The Coast Guard's been involved. So, proud of all that. And life goes on and moves on. And I, quite frankly, in some way, shape, or form, only stayed in touch with a couple of people. My boss, the late, great Lieutenant Rusty Muncie, was a guy that stayed in touch with me for years. And, that was a good thing. And just very few people here and there. And then probably in 2017, going into 2018, a Facebook page popped up, which is what Facebook is all about. And it was a Coast Guard Air Station Chicago Facebook page. And I got a request from a guy named Mike Phillips. So Master Chief Phillips is the guy running the page there. And he reached out to me, and one thing led to another and led to another. Next thing, we got 5 guys and 10 guys and a couple other people. And next thing you know, the crew's starting to get together, the band's back together again. And right around that time, Mike sent a picture up to me of the 1459, that helicopter I mentioned, was sitting in a parking lot just outside of the former base perimeter of Glenview, and it was in pretty tough shape. The last time I saw that helicopter was probably around 1991. No, probably later than that. I think it went out of commission in 98. So it would have been in the early 2000s, I suppose. And I took my kids to the Museum of Science and Industry, and there was that helicopter hanging from the rafters in perfect condition, like we just flew it and cleaned it and parked it the day before. And I was confused as to why that it was there. So come to find out, an upstart museum attempt was being made in Glenview, and it's the Glenview NAS, museum there, and they were really keeping track of all the artifacts that made NAS Glenview a historical piece of, especially World War II, but across the board, for all the years that it was in service. And a major, major attempt was being made to hold as much of this material as possible, be accountable for it, and preserve it as a museum should. And unfortunately, I think what happens as time goes on, people forget. And that's too bad, but that's what museums are for, so we don't forget. And they did the very best they could with what they had, where they were at, to maintain this. And one of the big pieces of the collection was the 1459. So I had to investigate. So I drove out there, and I couldn't believe it was just sitting outside. And, I got to tell you, I got emotional. If any of my veterans are listening, and you kind of understand what I'm talking about. When you get around machinery or the people where you have memories back from a different time in your life, for me, it was very emotional. And I walked up to this helicopter. I probably had a dozen flights or so in over the 4 years I was in. And all I could see was Rusty Muncie in the pilot seat. That's all I could see. And I thought, wow, we got to do something about this. So one thing led to another, and I started talking with the folks that owned the helicopter at that point, and it went back and forth and back and forth. I'm condensing 7 years, literally, of effort, going to meetings, making phone calls, emails, whatever, doing whatever we could to support the museum's efforts to secure and maintain all those items that they had and they were going to keep for display at some point, hopefully, and whatever we could do for the 1459 that we knew deserved better. So late last year, I guess it was, the timeline is a little fuzzy for me over 7 years, but I went to this meeting, that's more than a year and a half ago. I went to this meeting one night, December or January of a year and a half ago, somewhere in there. And I went to this board meeting. I learned why they call them board meetings, because for me it was B-O-R-E-D, not B-O-A-R-D, because I sat for 3.5 hours listening to people argue about the size of curbs. And I thought, really, this is what you're going to do? Until it got all the way to the end of the meeting, they were going to have open comments. And I got up and basically said, and there were some great World War II vets that spoke as well on behalf of these artifacts and things. And I was there to represent the Coast Guard. And I said, listen, you can make history by saving history and do the right thing and figure out a way to work with these folks to preserve, this amazing effort that was done here at Glenview for so many years. It's so many thousands of people served at. And that night, I sent an email to the guy who was the village president. The next day, he called me and he said, thanks for coming with, blah, blah, blah. And I remembered he had made a comment that I believe his stepfather had been in the Navy and stationed there. So there was a connection there. Then I forgot about it because, quite frankly, I thought, I ain't going to any more meetings. I'm not going to answer any more emails. I'm not making any more phone calls. If this happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. We did everything we could. And sometimes you just got to leave what alone. Not long after that, I got a phone call from a guy named Paul Branke. And Paul Branke gets me on the phone. He says, John, this is Paul Branke, because that's his name. And he says, I want to talk to you about how do we preserve the 1459. I about fell on the floor because it took 7 years for that phone call to come in. He is joining me right now. I want to pick him up. He calls in from Glenview. Paul, welcome to the show.
Thank you, John. Good to be on the show.
There's quick 7 years condensed in about 5.5 minutes, brother.
Yeah, I forgot about those 7 years. I forgot that part of the story.
Yeah, you came in the fourth quarter, man.
I got to be the guy at the end. Yeah, it's a fascinating story. Just so everybody knows, just to kind of recap a little bit of what you said, that copter was at the Museum of Science and Industry for 18 years.
Okay.
And then the Hangar One Foundation, which is an organization that had collected all of these wonderful materials from Naval Air Station Glenview and other parts of Glenview's aviation history, acquired the helicopter in 2006, and then they brought it back to Glenview, and they put it in some parades and stuff like that, and we're using it as a way to honor our history and honor in particular the Coast Guard history. And then it kind of fell into a space on that property, and was wrapped in that blue stuff. Remember that?
I do.
I think you might have seen it. And but if it wasn't for the Hangar One Foundation, we would not have this artifact or all of the other artifacts that are part of their collection. In 2005 of December, the Glenview History Center, which is a separate organization, acquired their collection. Mm-hmm. And at that point, and I was at the meeting you were at, by the way, as just a observer in the audience, and it was a very long meeting, and I was, you did, the way you described it to your audience is exactly correct. Exactly. You're totally accurate. It was a little cringeworthy, but it was an opportunity to meet you. And as our organization, the History Center, we had to figure out how we were going to acquire this collection from the Hangar One Foundation. That obviously the helicopter was a significant piece, and I just figured I would give you a call because we had a couple of options. Option one was to figure out a way to restore it, and we had no idea how to do that. We're a volunteer organization. We don't have the funds. We don't have the resources to do anything. We've never done anything like that. Two, find somebody else to do it, which is easier said than done. Or three, which is sell it for scrap.
Yeah. And
those are the three options. So I figured before we do anything, we better call this guy in and have a conversation so that we can make sure that, let you know what we're thinking, and maybe you could help us, and maybe we could come to a solution.
Yeah.
And that's when we had our meeting there, and we talked about that. And I just remember you saying, no, I have a better option. I've got option 4. Do you remember that?
I do. Option 4. This was another one of these things that, the dominoes start falling in the right direction at the right time, even though I may not realize it always. And one of our guys, Chief Warrant Officer Kurt Erickson, Mr. E, had put me in touch almost 2 years earlier with a fellow named Joe Barry, who also served at Coast Guard Air Station in Chicago, Coast Guard veteran, who is now running a shop up in Traverse City called Legacy Aviation. And he asked me, well, why didn't you get in touch with Joe and see what's going on? I'm like, well, I didn't even know what he was doing. Long story short, back and forth we go, and he's like, what if we can get the helicopter up here? We can restore it. Now there's a good idea. But again, there's a lot of blanks to fill in at that point. And so when we were sitting at that meeting, the three of us at your little hangar there, a little museum, you brought that up. And folks, I wish you could have been there to see the pictures of the diagrams this guy's got. You talk about a guy who's got the whole schematic set up. Oh, we got A and B here and C and D here. And we didn't want to get to the option D, which is scuttle the helicopter. But when I said there's this other option there, you guys kind of lit up a little bit. And quite frankly, I didn't even know how we were going to do it, but I knew it had to be done. And I think when sometimes you're in that position, you don't know the how, but you know the why, then the how starts to show itself.
Yeah, I think the beauty of collaborating with you was that was an unknown.
Yep.
I mean, neither of us really we had no idea that was an option, and it kind of just presented itself, and then it was like, okay, let's go get it.
Yeah. So
and that was beginning.
Exactly. So the domino starts falling that direction. And I started reaching out to a few guys that had been part of this from the beginning. Of course, Mike Phillips, who, found the helicopter online. The Sheik, Roger Schenk, he and I were roommates back in the day, and neither one of us were really arrested that often. But he's the first call I made because we'd been talking about this on and off. And then, of course, Joel Sherrard, who is I served with him back in the 80s. I called him because he was the guy that kind of got our reunion started, which was a couple of years before the helicopter. So all these parts were starting to gel and make sense and do something with, but we wouldn't know how the hell we're going to get this helicopter that was built in 1968 when Richard Nixon was president from Glenview to Traverse City. Can't fly it because those days are long gone. You can't put it on a train. What do? Hire a semi-truck? I mean, there was all these options out there. So in steps John Metza, my brother from another mother, who is so smart, he's scary. And he's like, I got a couple ideas. And it turns out in the long run, he rented this Super Duty truck, brought his trailer down. And he already had it all figured out. None of us knew what the hell's going to happen, but he had all figured out. And we perched that thing with a telehandler on this trailer, and we strapped it down like it had been there its whole time. And it was myself, Roger, Jim Smith, Smitty, John Metza, and Jolt and Joe Sherrard. And we all had it there. And, of course, you were there with your team as well, making sure we were well fed. You had the doors open. We had a great time. Outside of Metza having his shirt off, it was a pretty good deal.
He is a little bit of a mad scientist.
Yeah, he's amazing.
I was a little nervous. Does this guy really know what he's doing? He had to run to Home Depot. Remember, he had a couple of things, and
get some more duct tape.
When I'm laughing. I was like scared when he was, because we had cameras there. Remember, we had the Glenview TV there. We were filming. Okay, so he lifts this bird off of the original. Original thing it was on, and we thought, oh boy, I hope this thing, and it did.
It fit right on the trailer. And my big concern, Metza had figured out all the way north. So the plan was this. So let me just jump in. The plan was we could literally go around the bottom of the lake to Traverse City. That's a long ride, man, with that helicopter. So I thought, let's find out about the SS Badger, which is the ferry that goes from Manitowoc to Ludington. What would that be like? And that's only about 2.5, 3 hours from Glenview, as opposed to driving around the bottom of the lake. So once we figured out we're going to do that, we had to find out what the height restrictions were on all the overpasses, because once you put this thing, which is like 16'5" with tires on it, on top of this trailer, now there's no tires now, you had to figure in the height restrictions. And I was so scared to death we weren't going to get out of the friggin' parking lot because the wires at the end of the parking lot had dropped so much over the years. I thought we're never going to get out of the parking lot. It's never going to happen. Well, we did. And the very first viaduct we reached was not on the map. We had a 3-inch clearance underneath a train trestle heading out towards the highway. So we go up. I had set up to go through Milwaukee, have an escort. So the Milwaukee State Police post met us and cleared the way, and we headed north. And again, I wish we had more time to get into every detail, but the fact of the matter is you can only go about 50 miles an hour with that helicopter. We had a caravan going, so I was in the front. I had a box truck with extra engine and all the heavy stuff. Then Metza had the helicopter with him. And then Joe and Raj were in the back, bringing up the rear, keeping an eye on things. We blow through Milwaukee. We're heading north. We got to get up to Manitowoc by a certain time. And we realize we're probably not going to make it. And so Metza says, John, go ahead and tell the ship we're coming, because they're waiting for us. He's been in communication with them the whole time. So I finally get there, and I pull in, and they say, well, where's the helicopter? And the whole back of this Badger, this enormous ship, is sitting there filled with people wanting to see this antique helicopter, and I come driving up with a U-Haul box truck, a little disappointing for them. But I said, I think he's right behind me. And at last I thought he was 20 minutes behind me. We're not going to make it. And here comes Metza hauling you-know-what down the road with this helicopter. We made it, folks, with 4 minutes to spare before we launched. 4 minutes. Even in Coast Guard terms, that's cutting it really close. So we get on the ship. We go across Lake Michigan. It takes 4 hours to get across. We just yucked it up and slept the whole time because we hadn't seen each other. And Joe and I and Roger and Metza, we get over to the place, and here's on the other side is Mike Hicks, the Penguin, Bill Stipik, and Tim Doc Watson meeting us. And they're waving at us like we're on the Love Boat or something. It was great. Get the helicopter off. Head up north to Traverse City. We're about an hour south of there, and we get stopped by the cops. And it was this young guy who was on duty. It was a reminder, this was Memorial Day Saturday, by the way, folks. A little busy. And this guy pulls us over, and the question he asked Metza, he's like, you got a permit for this? He goes, I don't know what kind of permits you need, but do you got one? And Metza, oh, yeah, I got it somewhere here, So the long and short of it is we get all the way to Traverse City at midnight. We unload the helicopter. We get the thing set up and just exhausted. It was a 7-year journey to get it there. And The next day, Joe Barry starts going over it. And at this point, as we're talking now, that was Memorial Day. They've already got the helicopter cleaned out. They found the tires. They found some of the other stuff we were looking for. The hoist was put into the belly of the helicopter underneath the deck plates. And they're starting about this restoration process. But the real crux of all this is it's all about teamwork, because those 7 years of meetings and emails and phone calls are important. But all it took was a one call from Paul to make it put together. And you guys came up with the money. You came up with the support. You flew over to Legacy and checked it out even before we started.
Well, a lot of people supported us in this. It was, the Village of Glenview was involved. They've been supportive. The Glenview Public Library, they helped us with people and to get things organized. The Hangar One Foundation, they helped us with the funding on getting it there. So there were a lot of other people involved in this thing to make it happen, which is great. Yeah, there is one thing one important element you left out of the story, John. People don't realize when we opened that bird up, it was full of mouse stuff.
Yeah.
Remember?
Yeah, I do. Very interesting.
It was like, it was a mouse condo or something.
Yeah.
And so anyway, all this mouse stuff. So, but then this is a story Metza told me. He said when he delivered the helicopter, to Legacy Aviation after that long journey, what happens? Out pops a mouse.
Yeah.
He said a mouse made that trip in the bird all the way there. When they got there, he jumped out.
Yeah, correct.
Can you believe that?
Yeah, he jumped out. We're all sitting there taking a break, and his mouth jumps out and starts running in circles like, where the hell am I? Where the hell am I? Where the hell am I? And then went back up into the helicopter, then jumped out again, and we're like, this is not. So now there's this transplant mouse, from Glenview, now living hopefully in the Traverse City area. So if you see him, you'll know where he came from.
I thought that was great.
But, this whole thing about remembering and preserving history, that's what you do at the Glenville History Center. This is not, though, what your organization was actually built for, not doing military stuff, correct?
Correct. Yeah, we mostly were doing Glenview history from probably the 1840s forward, beginning with the first people who homesteaded here. Mm-hmm. We don't have a lot of stuff. We have a little bit of information about some of the Native Americans who lived in the area, but not a lot. But then it was mostly the people who came here in the 30s, and then it was all about Prohibition time, and there's stories about Prohibition and taverns and brothels and all sorts of stuff, and some early aviation. And some of the people on our board were also on the board of the Hangar One, but the Hangar One was kind of doing their everything regarding aviation history and the Naval Air Station stuff. So we didn't really have a lot. So, but we should be, because it's such an important part of our history of Glenview, as well as the world. It gives us a lens into World War II. That's pretty cool. I mean, it changed the course of World War II. The naval aviators that trained here after Pearl Harbor, they needed an inland location to train where it was safe from German submarines, and they picked this area, and they flew over Lake Michigan, and where they created these landing pads to look like aircraft carriers to train these pilots, and they had 15,000 naval air aviators trained here. So that was an important part of winning World War II. And that's a huge story.
Yeah, and I remember when we were looking for any extra parts for the 1459, we were kind of sifting through all the amazing history that the Hangar One Foundation had secured over the years. And it really does tell a story. It's breathtaking, from the images, the pictures, the flight suits, the models, the equipment, you name it, the engines, everything in there. It's like literally, as it should be, like walking through history. And it's one of the things I think that's very, very difficult for someone like myself who served in that space, in that place. I can remember it being very different. I used to love going on top of the hangar. Maybe I had a couple of brown pops up there with me. You never know, Paul. I could have had a brown pop on top of the hangar, and we'd sit there at night, probably Roger and I, watching the P-3s, land and take off. It was just the most glorious thing. And you realize the history of that place and all that went along there. The Marine Corps had their stuff, and the Army had their guys behind us, and all the rest that went with it. And to just dismiss that, I think, is criminal almost. It's to the point where you have to, address the reason you have these houses you have now is because before that, this was here. And it's pretty amazing, really, what Hangar One had pulled off over the years. So now you guys have kind of inherited all that. I have people ask me all the time, so what's going to happen with the helicopter next? So we're figuring that out as we go along.
Yeah, it's to be continued. Obviously, our mission is to figure out a way to honor that piece of history and the people served. And so we're reviewing some options, and I look forward to figuring out a solution. It's going to be, just like, saving it and getting it to where it is now, it's going to require collaboration and getting the right people involved, the village involved, the library involved, the history center, and then other people, other people who are interested in preserving Glenview's history or aviation history need to be involved in helping us in this effort so that we can do the right thing.
It was one of those that was meant to be things. It just took a while to get to that point. And I got to tell you, it was just, I remember when I texted you at like 1 o'clock in the morning saying we made it. There was a picture of the helicopter there. All of us could not believe that this had taken place. It really was almost like a dream come true for so many of us. Everybody on that team, myself, Joe Barry, Joe Sherrard, Smitty, the Sheik, Metza, Hicks, the Penguin, Doc, we all flew on that helicopter. And to be able to have all of us hauling that thing up, to Traverse City, Michigan, was like, of course, that's what we're going to do, because that's the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah, when you guys left Glenview, it was you had a convoy, and you were in a front truck, a box truck, and then there was the helicopter being pulled by Metza, and then behind was a Jeep that I think who was driving.
Raj driving it, yeah.
Raj was driving it. It was like a convoy, and you got past that initial wire, and I got to tell you, I was nervous. It's like. I'm thinking, God, I hope they make it there today. I really hope they make it. And it's like watching your kid go, off to college. I hope they're going to make it up. They're going to be. And I was so happy. Well, you were sending me little photos, little updates along the way, and I was sharing those with the people at the History Center, the Hangar One Foundation people, a whole bunch of people. I was passing these photos along as you're going along, and I thought, okay, fine, I got on the ferry, great. And then when you landed, I was so happy. I was so happy when I got the final word that and there was a picture of you guys standing around it, and everybody was, thumbs up, and it was a beautiful sight. It was a beautiful day. It really was.
Yeah, well, listen, I appreciate all the effort. Appreciate all the effort you put into it, and the folks at the Glenview History Center and the Hangar One Foundation. Over the years when I've sat here at CPT, I had updates talking about it because it's important, and I'm glad to say that that's where it landed, no pun intended, and we'll see where she lands next. So, Paul, thanks so much for checking in.
Thanks for having me, John. Great to talk to you.
All right, we'll take a short time out, wrap this one up for the day on WCPT.
As the ongoing debate over climate change continues to heat up, the concept of denial takes on a whole new meaning. The scientific community has a split decision when it comes to the notion that human activity plays a role in the warming of the planet. It's not a 50-50 split decision. It's 97% who agree that the massive buildup of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere has to do with our carbon footprints, and 3% who insist that all that is occurring is simply part of the natural cycles of Earth. To be clear, most of the 3%ers are on the payroll of oil and energy companies. The DNA of denial has a slew of talking heads in the media, pounding away at the solid scientific evidence, and companies spend millions to create doubt around climate change. Perhaps if they spent millions to develop green energy sources instead, they would be more profitable in the long run. What a concept. I'm Bill Curtis for Earth Matters.
Alexa, play WCPT.
WCPT from TuneIn.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Filling in today for Joan, Chicago media personality, John St. Augustine.
Hey, so Patty will not be in tonight, but Paul Shivari is going to be joining you in just a couple of minutes.
Tomorrow.
Oh, tomorrow. So who's coming in? Pre-recorded.
Yeah.
Don't call here. She's not really here. Just through the magic of technology. Patty, I hope you're doing well wherever you are. I miss not seeing you. Joan will be back on Wednesday. Thanks for that tip-off there, by the way. I appreciate working with you today. Lady B, ladies and gentlemen, makes this show the way it's supposed to. I can't thank you enough for allowing me to have a little bit of time with you today, and I hope that there were some things in here you maybe found value in. And let me just remind you of this really important thing. The headlines are not as important as the lifelines. Be well. Safe travels. Keep the faith. Till next time. Thanks much.